I'm doing today. But I usually just put my stuff here and wait, see where everyone else winds up sitting. Then everyone else sits and they go, oh, I guess I'll just stay around. I think so. So we have one. Anthony just said he's doing the 84. Those are pushes, I guess, kind of later. So, says 80 now would be that change? I don't think so. Yeah, right. I don't think those things gonna do that. But you go.
continuing with the budget in a minute. A couple of announcements, nothing earth-shattering. There are some new supplements, but, big but, they were not submitted to the print shop in time to be printed. So they will arrive tomorrow, and they're all for articles that we'll be dealing with tomorrow. So it's not a tragedy. It's not going to impact what we're doing tonight, but you won't have the benefit of having the paper to read tonight as you go to sleep. You won't have that to sleep in. So that's the downside. It is online if you are interested, and it relates to ARCA. Is the advisory committee motion for tomorrow's special town meeting, which actually is exactly the same as the select board motion, except taking out certain parcels, and that's what we'll be hearing tomorrow night. There's been additional movement on some warrant articles, one of which we're going to be dealing with tonight, Article 12. Both the advisory committee and the select board agree on what is being listed as the on the advisory committee motion, and the petitioner, I'm told, agrees. So that's a good thing. There's been a lot of activity on Articles 17 and 25, but that's going to be a continuing saga, as the advisory committee will be taking it up tomorrow, and I suspect there may continue to be differences, but we'll be hearing about that tomorrow. What other goodies do I have? Article 22, the advisory committee and the select board are reconciled, so that's a good thing. So a lot of the differences and competing motions on a lot of warrant articles have gone away. So that's a good thing too. One comment I got from the big folks, Brookline Interactive Group, if you're lining up at the microphones, if you can line up to the back, because if you line up to the side, you block a camera, and we don't want to block their cameras. So just line up to the side. And that's all the announcements I have. So now we're going to continue the budget. And since last night, I've gotten a few requests to go back and speak about the select board and or town council's budget. So first up is Harry Friedman, and he's asked for 5 minutes, which I've granted.
Harry Friedman, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 12, and member of the Advisory Committee. I need 6 minutes. I will speak fast.
5 minutes.
I understand. That's why I will speak fast. Last night, Danelle O'Neill gave a very moving speech. I was surprised at the reaction or lack thereof. And then I remembered the reaction earlier in the evening when the moderator announced that the Select Board had accepted the Advisory Committee's budget. There was a round of applause. And it later dawned on me that people think the problem to which Danelle referred is solved, or that we might be voting on a settlement of the case of the Casella Five at some point in the proceedings. Unfortunately, neither is the case. There are two issues. One is the $24,000 in legal fees that Casella Five incurred when they were made the target of a spurious investigation. The AC has asked the Select Board to pay this claim. To date, the Select Board has not. This is not in the hands of town meeting, and we won't be voting on it. It is in the hands of the 5 elected officials to my right. Only they can authorize payment of the claim. The other issue, but one that is certainly part and parcel of the Casella case, is the town's zeal in investigating town meeting members who speak up. The Casella case arose when 5 town meeting members took it upon themselves to fight the privatization of trash collection. As a result, they were faced with a plethora of charges that changed and morphed from day to day last summer. The initial charges arose when an unnamed, non-DPW town employee approached the town administrator and asked if the actions of the Casella Five weren't like the actions of former school superintendent Linus Guillory, who had, quote, violated the conflict of interest law by using school resources in the Pierce override, end quote. Well, the never-to-be-named accuser had his facts wrong. The school superintendent was charged with a campaign finance law violation, not an ethics violation. And the Casella Five could not have violated the campaign finance law because there was no campaign. This was a budget matter before town meeting, not an election. So when asked if this wasn't the same action that Linus Guillory was accused of, the town administrator could simply have responded, no, this is completely different. Unfortunately, he didn't. As the summer progressed, the list of alleged violations grew as the town threw pasta against the wall to see what would stick. One of the Casella Five was first told that she was a relative of a DPW employee. She was not. Then the town said the Five had violated the select board issued fraudulent use policy. The quote-unquote fraud involved having taken a photo of several sanitation workers standing in front of a garbage truck and showing this photo during the town meeting debate. The policy was written to describe actual theft by actual town employees, such as having stolen the garbage truck in question. Further, there was no statutory authority to empower the select board to write such a policy applying to town meeting members. I would show you the photo now, but I don't want to be investigated. Finally, the Five were charged with violating state ethics law. When it was pointed out last summer by the chairman and vice chairman of the advisory committee that this charge should just be referred to the state and that the state would conduct an investigation that would cost the town nothing, the town administrator said he did not have the discretion to do so. That was just wrong. I'm an admirer of the town administrator. I think he's a smart fellow, but we're not paying him $250,000 a year to have no discretion and to refuse to use his judgment. We could get an AI bot to do that for free. This investigation was a nothing burger. All of this was over a photo. What caused the Five to have to lawyer up and spend $24,000 on legal representation during the investigation? When they filed for reimbursement, the response from town council was that there was no need to hire legal assistance. This despite the fact that in the list of charges against the Five was one that could have led to a felony conviction. No first-year law student would advise anyone in this situation to forego legal counsel. Town council has also argued that they are not entitled to payment because the possibility of a multi-million-dollar civil rights claim on their behalf is very low. I think he's wrong, and in such a case, $24,000 would be chump change. He has also argued that it would be setting a bad precedent. It would mean that any claim by any town employee they could go for reimbursement. Again, I think he's wrong. These are not town employees. These are legislators. The bad precedent we're setting here is not agreeing to settlement of a claim. The bad precedent we are setting is the recent propensity of the town to investigate town meeting members on spurious charges. These investigations are run like Star Chamber proceedings. Who made the complaint against the Casella Five? We don't know. Why wasn't the complaint reduced to writing? We don't know. What exactly were the charges? We don't know because they change from day to day. Why did the town have to hire an investigator when some of the issues could have been answered by a law student and the others could have been done for free? These type of investigations have a chilling effect on anyone who serves in town government.
Please conclude.
I will. I have, yes, the select board needs to pay the claims of the Casella Five, and the town administrator needs to use better judgment and discretion in initiating these hateful investigations.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 Town Meeting Member, and a member of the Advisory Committee. I echo Mr. Friedman's words. In 2 separate meetings, the Advisory Committee met with Town Council and the Town Administrator regarding alleged violations by our town meeting colleagues. let me give you some highlights. I'll start with my question to the town administrator. What specifically was the complaint? His answer, isn't that the same thing the superintendent of schools, meaning the former superintendent, did on the Pierce School debt exclusion? As I said in response at the time, and I'll say again tonight, that's not a complaint, it's a question. And the answer is no. The former superintendent was found to have violated campaign finance law. We're repeatedly told he violated the ethics law. Our executive administration can't seem to differentiate between the two. I also asked repeatedly what authority the executive had to investigate members of the legislature. Town council responded by stating that I was trying to make a separation of powers argument. In fact, I wasn't trying to make any argument. I was asking a specific question about executive authority. I was promised a legal citation, and I'm still waiting. Similarly unanswered was the question of by what authority the select board can adopt a policy that applies beyond the executive branch. Lastly, the repeated claim that they had no discretion. But the town administrator late in the second session stated unambiguously that if he had it to do over again, he'd do it differently. If doing it differently isn't discretion, what is? One thing that's clear to me, town council and the town administrator can't consistently describe an account of the complaint or of an alleged violation in the context of applicable law. Ask yourself why that is. In a post this afternoon on the TMMA listserv, I stated the following. They can't change the past. I urge them to change the present. That is, make whole those who had no choice but to react to an over-the-top response by the executive to what was effectively a non-event by members of the town's legislature. I thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Birnbaum has requested a question, I believe. So he's remote.
Yes. Hello. Not about the, okay, I'm hearing myself in my ears. So I'm going to do my best to pretend I'm hearing myself 2 seconds delay, but it'll be a little choppy. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Lee Birnbaum, town meeting member, precinct 9. We'll be discussing public records at this town meeting. I wanted to ask what we are doing to secure the public records of our previous moderators and current assistant moderators who communicated and continue to communicate only on personal or work email addresses. As I understand it, all of these emails are public records, and they are public records the town has no ability to retrieve, even when they are responsive to request. Indeed, I made such a request in March of 2024. In April 2024, I was told by town council that, quote, we are working to ensure that there are no responsive emails on any town's official private email accounts. We will follow up this response with more details on this remaining issue. In my many emails on this topic to the town council, to the clerk, and even after a determination by the Secretary of State's office in my favor, that is the most recent communication I have from the town on this matter. To get back to the question, aside from the fact that I made this request to understand the totality of a quite uncivil accusation directed at me by a former moderator, this seems to be a massive problem in our records retention and one that grows riskier by the day, as any of those personal or work email addresses could be closed any day. What are we doing to rectify this and ensure we meet our public records obligations that cover at this point decades? And please allow me to stay unmuted in case there are any follow-up questions.
Thank you. Do we have any kind of response that we can give Mr. Birnbaum?
Joe Callanan, Town Council. So in response to your question about your public records request from March of 2024, you responded that we did respond. However, I included in that response that if we were to get any more records, then you would get them. and you haven't got a response because we haven't got any more records from those town officials. As to your question about what efforts we're trying to do to ensure that the volunteers, town officials that do not have brookline.ma.gov emails, we've been taking efforts to have people CC the board archives email when they're conducting town business. You're constantly reminded by the TMMA that, in my opinion, town meeting member emails are also public records. So we do rely on the 255 town meeting members, but also our 400 board and commission volunteers to make sure that they are complying with the public records law. There was a question last night about what my office does in response to public records. We actually don't get involved in public records requests unless there's appeals or when the departments or employees have questions. So just like departments are responsible for responding to public records, so are volunteers and elected officials, unless they have a brookline.ma.gov email, in which we're able to then access the emails without them having to do the work. But if you're doing town business on a private email, then it's your responsibility to keep track of those. When we get public records requests, we turn to the person or the department and ask for responsive records, and we rely on those people to respond truthfully and accurately. So when they say, these are all the records, then we rely on their representation that those are all the records.
Okay, aside from the fact that I literally won an appeal and haven't heard from the town since then, there are decades of emails that have been sent to the moderator and to the current assistant moderators. And you're saying the town has done nothing to attempt to secure them in advance, and the expectation that any of them might ever retire or change their email address. Like, we know that they're an elected official, and we're doing nothing to keep those records in advance.
I wouldn't say we're doing nothing, but also I don't remember your request was for decades of emails. It was for a limited period. It was for a limited period of time. If your request was for decades of emails, then we probably would have responded with a fee estimate. Because in responding to public records, our initial reaction is if it can be done within 2 hours, you get the records. However, if it's going to take longer than 2 hours, we respond with a fee estimate. So if I remember your request correctly, which was from 2 years ago, we did respond because we thought we were able to get it done within 2 hours. But if you're asking for decades of records, then we absolutely would have responded with fee estimate. That was an issue in the Boston Globe article that you might have read about, that it took 18 months for us to respond. Because the initial public records request, we thought, only dealt with a handful of emails. And it did take a while to respond to that because the school department had lost one of those central office employees that Superintendent Wong mentioned. So there was a gap in the staffing at the school department in responding to public records. However, when we understood that their request was looking for 300 emails, all the emails of the superintendent for a week, we responded with a fee estimate, which the requester did not pay. As soon as she paid, we produced those records within 6 weeks. So that's the timeline of 18 months. But what we do to preserve these public records is ask the employee or the official, if they're using a private email, that they are responsible for preserving them, just like the town is responsible for preserving the brookline.ma.gov emails.
Thank you. Mr. Carey is asked to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to town meeting members for permitting me to speak on this matter. First of all, I want to say that most of my adult life I have spent in public service. I strive to obtain the utmost in ethical standards and following the law, especially the rule of law now in this political environment, in this national environment. I have a great deal of respect for the work of the legislature and of the advisory committee in particular. Their jobs are hard, and they do yeoman's work on difficult and complicated matters. The advisory committee sometimes makes recommendations that staff do not agree with. Town meeting sometimes makes choices that staff do not recommend they take. That is okay. That is the province of the legislature. The legislature's job is to pass laws. We can advise, we can talk about what it is that we do on a day-in, day-out basis, but when you pass a law, we implement that law. And you can see in the past responses from the town meetings since I've been here, there have been times when town meeting has passed a law that staff have said, you know, we don't have the money to do that, we don't think that would be a wise choice. Town meeting has said, okay, we've heard you, but we're going to pass that law anyway. And when that happens, we say thank you, and we enforce that law, because it is town meeting's job to pass laws, and it is the executive's job to ensure and take care that those laws are faithfully executed. And it's that take care clause that leads to this question of what happens when there's an allegation that someone is not following the law. What authority does that derive from? In Massachusetts, there is a home rule amendment to the state constitution that says that all powers not expressly kept from the the individual municipalities by the legislature are permitted to be exercised by the locality. That means that legislatures can pass laws that don't conflict with state law, and that means that executives can adopt policies, such as the immigration enforcement policy that is now the subject of Article 17 to be codified into a bylaw, without necessarily needing the full redress of the legislature to do so. So that is the source of the authority here. And I will note that the state ethics law, the State Ethics Commission has expressly said that investigations under the state ethics law are the province of both the State Ethics Commission and localities. And when the town passed a policy on fraudulent conduct, it said, quote, that town council or her or his designee shall investigate suspected violations of this policy. One of the potential violations of this policy is a violation of the state ethics law. And that state ethics law, I believe, I can quote the language of that ethics law, which basically says in so many words, employees may not use public resources for political advocacy. Every year, I put out a memo to town staff saying, employees, do not use public resources for political advocacy, whether election-related or not election-related. That is the state ethics law. And if you serve on a board or committee, the state considers you to be an employee. In the advisory committee's case, they are considered special government employees, which means that some provisions of the state ethics law do not apply to them with particular force, but this one still does. No one was investigated because they were a member of the legislature. No one was investigated for lawmaking. No one was investigated or retaliated against because they had a political view. Their political views are protected speech, and I take that deadly seriously. I am a public servant, and I hold myself to the highest standards of conduct. And I will not accept the characterization otherwise. I am your servant, your public servant, and I do this job for a living because I love it. I love working for this community. And that sometimes means having to make hard choices. Means having to make hard choices that you know are going to lead to a conversation like this. You know are going to lead to more questions. But at the end of the day, if I had discretion in this instance, if I could have said, oh, I'm going to duck this, I'm not going to investigate this even though there have been credible allegations of misconduct. And I don't know what happened here, and I'm never going to know. I don't want to know. If I had said that, then the next time that happened, someone could reasonably come up to me and say, hey, Chaz, you ran away from a legitimate complaint because you were afraid. You were afraid of the blowback you would face from town meeting. You were afraid of the politics of it. You gave up your ethical obligations because you were afraid. And I'm not afraid. I am not afraid to be ethical. I am not afraid to follow the rules that have been set for me. I am not afraid to stand for the rule of law. I believe that this community is capable of great things. I believe you have already done so many great things. You were at the vanguard of local government in this state. You've done things like the cigarette ban, which the legislature is now trying to undo. You have done things like pass the LGBTQ Communities Act law in a way that didn't just comply, but went beyond the level of compliance necessary. And you did it in a way that brokered compromise. That's remarkable, remarkable work. And I'm proud to be serving this community that does that remarkable work. But a part of being at that vanguard of public life is following the law, is doing what has to be done when it has to be done, even if it is hard, even if it leads to these difficult conversations. I will say, for the record, that yes, there are things that we could have done differently in this instance. I think particularly of how this was noticed, how the individuals in question were notified of this investigation. I have listened to Mr. O'Neill's passionate remarks yesterday, and I really felt for him, and I feel for all of these individuals who felt that they were being targeted, who felt that they were the subject of potential criminal complaint. That should not have happened. That should have been done differently. They should have been notified differently. And 8 days after the investigation was opened, when it was put to me directly by one of those individuals that that was how they were feeling, I clarified that because that was a mistake. Did I know that this investigation would last months and cost $31,000? No. I had hoped that it would last weeks and cost close to nothing. I would hope that we could get to the bottom of this and move on from it. It is unfortunate that we were unable to do that. It's unfortunate that we're in the position that we're in now. It's my hope that we can learn from this. We can pass new rules and regulations that set clear standards for when investigations are to be conducted, that the advisory committee can also adopt a code of conduct to ensure that we are all following our requirements and staying in our same, under our constitutional rules, and that we don't wind up in this situation again, because it is unfortunate. But thank you very much for allowing me this time to speak, and I hope I've clarified what I can clarify here.
Thank you. Mr. Vitolo.
Mr. Moderator, I rise to a question of privilege.
Okay.
I greatly appreciate what Mr. Carey just said. I'm grateful for his work.
Who are you?
I am State Representative Tommy Vitolo, and my point of privilege is that Mr. Carey just spoke for the legislature, all 200 of us. And he may have meant to say some members of the legislature, but he didn't. He said the legislature, including me, and he's wrong. And he's wrong. And I hope that in the future, he will refrain from speaking for the entire state legislature. I certainly don't do that. I hope he won't either as a member of that body. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Margolis.
Thank you. John Margolis, Precinct 7.
Turn the mic on, please.
Where do we?
No, that's not you. That's them. Try it now, Mr. Margolis.
Thank you. John Margolis, Precinct 7. Oh, okay. I have seldom been accused of speaking too softly. John Margolis, Precinct 7. I have a question for the administrator. If the 5 advisory committee members who were investigated had done the same things that they did, but if they had spoken out against the amendment that they supported, that is, that would have retained the town as to collect trash, would there still have been an investigation? Would you have done the same investigation that was done?
Chess Carey, Town Administrator. Thank you for your question, sir. Yes. Yes, if I had received that complaint, I would have done that regardless.
Mr. Ananian.
C. Scott Ananian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10, and I'm afraid I'm going to get myself in trouble for this, but
Never.
No one appreciated when I said this years ago when we had much the same discussion about reimbursing Mr. Rosenthal, a former town meeting member. And I said then, and I will repeat now, I don't think doing this ad hoc on a case-by-case basis is a good way to run this town. It leads to all sorts of personality issues and we decide if those people are worthy or those people are worthy, I do think we need a policy to govern these sorts of reimbursements at a policy level in our bylaws. That we have to have this conversation over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Arissa Boyd is remote and has a question.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Boyd. Ooh, there's a precinct 15 down. Asking Mr. Carey, he didn't address the actual photograph and what the issue is that started the investigation. So I'm still unclear as to what the allegations really were on an equal basis. Because from my understanding, everybody, the other exceptions, that we should be able to have an open, and I hear that is an ethical violation.
We're having a little trouble hearing you. And is that? You can try.
Chaz Carey, Town Administrator. Thank you for your question. Ms. Voigt, if I understood it correctly, you were asking what the specific issue is regarding this photograph, why that was an impetus for investigation, and the concerns raised there. I will note that the photograph was not the inciting event that caused us to think that we might need, after town meeting and after the political debate was over, to potentially engage an outside investigator. That was a voicemail that was left by a member of the Transportation Board on a subcontractor's phone purporting to be with the Transportation Board and making, asking to speak to this contractor about a matter that the town was, quote unquote, I believe, thinking of doing, but the town was not thinking of doing, and that the Transportation Board had no authority over. At the time, I didn't know what this conversation was about. I didn't know why they were invoking the Transportation Board. I didn't know anything other than what was in the voicemail, which sounded like something that needed to be looked into. But I also knew that because this was a matter of political importance and because I had supported the DPW director, the commissioner, apologies, when she had said that this was not a good way forward, that I was conflicted out. It would be an appearance of a conflict of interest if I personally investigated that or if someone who reported directly to me investigated that. So we would need to bring someone in. So at that point I knew at the end of town meeting, after everything was done, and after there could be no allegation that we were trying to influence town meeting's decision by conducting an investigation during the pendency of the political debate, we had that initial conversation about whether or not that would be appropriate. And there was behavior subsequent to that. I believe actually the photograph was the last of the incidents that wound up being added to the list of things that the investigator needed to look into. Why is the photograph an issue? Again, under state ethics law, if you are a town employee, you may not while in uniform or otherwise on the job, use town resources for political advocacy. The individuals in question, some of them are in uniform, some of them are backed by DPW trucks, and the logo of those trucks is visible. I didn't know at the time that photograph was taken what those individuals' intent was or what they had been told. I knew, for example, that one of the people in that photograph did not work sanitation. I believe that person had been on the job for about a month and was not involved in sanitation and had not been hired to do that job. I also received word that in addition to the advisory committee members and transportation board member, there was a town employee present and being part of this conversation. If that town employee had taken the photograph, they would not be a policy-making employee. They would have no defense. And so I didn't know whether that town employee had taken the photograph or was involved in any way. Fortunately, after investigation, it was determined that that town employee was not involved. And that town employee cooperated fully with the investigation and was cleared. But I didn't know. And so, again, I had to have someone ask those questions, someone who was not me, so that they could feel confident that there was no conflict of interest and an independent-minded person was looking into it. So I hope I answered your question there. I apologize for going on a bit, but thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else at the mics, and I think we should move on. Human Resources Department?
Moderator, rise for a point of privilege.
Point of privilege?
Just for a moment, thank you. I didn't know you were going to be so quick. Paul
We've
Warren.
been at this for 40 minutes.
To end it. Paul Warren, town meeting member.
I think we've heard both sides.
Yep, I just want to say a couple of things. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think that's my right. First, I am named in the complaint, so I'll divulge that. I'm also, I think I'm indemnified by the town, so I don't have personal financial interest. But I do want to say a couple of things. First, and I said this on the list, I have not worked with anybody that has more integrity than Chaz Carey. I've worked deeply with him, closely on a day-to-day basis, and I can affirm that what he said about his integrity is the highest standard. And the thing that troubles me most about what's going on here is that there's an assignment of intent, retaliation.
This does not sound like a point of privilege.
Point of privilege is going to be 1 minute. It's not retaliation, and I think that it's unfair to do that. Chaz Carey is an outstanding town administrator. We have an outstanding advisory committee member. Everybody has the best interest for this town. Chaz has put forward a suggestion, which I think the former chair of the select board had suggested, that the way to move forward here, that no one has said the reimbursement wouldn't happen. It's on the table. The town administrator and the select board want to work with the advisory committee to figure out what these procedures are. So just like Scott and Annie had said, we can figure out and prevent this going forward. I think that's the right way to do it. Instead of tearing people down, I think there's a great opportunity to put something systemic in place to lift up the town and the legislature and the executive branch sufficiently. So I hope that's where we can go to instead of continuing to attack people. Thank you.
Thank you. The Human Resources Department, $750,131. Information Technology, $2,806,150. Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, $251,392. The Finance Department, $3,764,773. Advisory Committee, $32,022. Mr. Rodrejo.
Yes, Carlos Hidrojo, town meeting member, precinct 14. I had a question for the IT department.
Sure.
And the question is, what services do you provide for audiovisual, and and how do you rely on the Brookline Interactive for supplementing those services? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. Feng Yang, Chief Information Officer, Information Technology Department. Thank you for the question. We do not have audio-video staff in IT department, so we collaborate with BIG. So for instance, my staff, there are a lot of IT staff here. They handle all the devices. We support all the Wi-Fi access points that you guys are connected to. We have improved all the connectivity throughout the years, and you probably have noticed. And so my staff support all the networking, the devices, Zoom platform, and then they work with BIG, and BIG handles audio, video. That's their expertise. So I don't have AV support staff on my staff. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Thank you, and I'll note there's IT staff throughout the auditorium right now. Ms. Seidman.
Kathy Seidman, Precinct 2. Can someone tell me how how the town arranges, excuse me, how the town arranges to support BIG in providing the staff and AV equipment and all that stuff? How is that paid for by the town? Because BIG is a 501c3 and it doesn't necessarily have the capacity to do that.
That doesn't, I'll let Melissa talk about the BIG relationship, but be brief, and that it doesn't relate to the IT budget, but.
Sure, Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. So the town receives money through the cable licenses for both RCN and for Comcast. And so the town passed home rule legislation that entitled the town to keep a portion of the franchise fee, and that is part of our local receipts for general fund revenue, and then BIG gets 2% out of the franchise fee. So that's part of the support that they get. They also get money for capital payments that are also coming through the licenses as well. And I would just say that I think that the role of BIG has changed, especially with COVID and the introduction of Zoom technology. And we have been working on a memorandum of agreement that helps solidify what the services the town requires and what the expectations are from the town and with BIG as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Park.
Thank you. Susan Park, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. So it does appear that Brookline depends on the Brookline Interactive Group in many ways, such as tonight's recording. And as many of us know, the Brookline Interactive Group has lost some employees in the last 3 months. And so I just want to know, since Brookline does depend so much on BIG, like what can we do about that? What are some different strategies, because they are financially needing some support and assistance?
Yeah, that's not really in the budget discussion. It is a good question, and it's a question I think that should be answered. But we're in a situation where the cable fees are going down, and BIG needs help, and there's only a limited amount of help the town can give, so BIG is going to need some resources from elsewhere. Ms. Correa.
Thank you, Patty Correa, Precinct 6. How does the IT budget cover the obligations that have kicked in under the American with Disabilities Act? Does it provide capacity for the town to comply directly? Will it rely on BIG for compliance? How is that budget item accounting for the new obligations for access by people with disabilities? Thank you.
Is Fang still here? You might as well stay down here. Or Mr. Carey will take it.
Chess Carey, Town Administrator, thank you for that question. The ADA compliance deadline has been pushed back a year, so we are in the process of building out that compliance. In fact, we have a working group across departments working on this. It is not solely IT's responsibility. It is the responsibility of departments who are posting things on our website. It is the responsibility of people who are conducting meetings. So everyone has a role to play in ensuring that all the stuff that we're doing is ADA compliant. And yes, for example, the ODE-ICR's budget includes money that we are moving toward, that we are using for programming to move towards ADA compliance on this front. So yes, across departments, we are working diligently to meet that new deadline and be fully ADA compliant in our operations.
Including with regard to audio-visual meeting?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jeremy Redburn, Precinct 12. I think I have a similar but not fully. Sorry, Jeremy Redburn, Precinct 12. I have a similar but I don't think fully answered question, which is if BIG were to cease to exist tomorrow, is there anything that we'd be in violation of, whether ADA, open meeting laws, or other items that we are dependent for compliance on from our relationship with BIC?
I see Mr. Callanan raring to speak. He thinks it's an exaggeration?
I'm willing to speak. I'm not raring to speak. Joe Callanan, Town Council. I'm not familiar with any obligations we would be not in compliance with if we didn't. The idea with kind of the fees from the cable providers, we're only allowed to spend it on public education, PEG, public education and government sources. So that's how they get some of the money, because the money that we get from cable providers is limited for its purpose. So some of it goes to BIG, some of it is used by IT in the town for, again, public education and government uses. But I can't think of anything that we would be in violation of law if BIG didn't provide the services to the town.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps. Can everyone hear me?
And who are you?
Rich Snyder, Precinct 2. I have a question for the IT department. How are you managing the provisioning and deprovisioning of licenses for users who come and go to manage the cost of the software that you're using, as well as how are you rationalizing the overall application placemat to make sure we're maximizing the amount of money we spend on at least software anyway? Thank you.
An IT question. Wow.
Feng Yang, Chief Information Officer, Information Technology Department. Thanks for the question. Actually, it's a great question. It's part of the challenges as well. So we have a lot of systems, a lot of software licenses, and we manage them very cost effectively. We make sure we onboard users, we terminate users, and we make sure only the users that need specific licenses, we provision them. So as some of you maybe in the technology world know that there's a huge increase in software cost every year, and that's my budget challenges, and every year I ask for percentage of increase for software, and then we have conversations, and Chess knows about that. Yeah, so that's always, and especially recent years, with cloud, migration, with a lot of the new emerging technology, software cost is increasing a lot. That's why, we're very cautious, and my staff are doing a fantastic job in managing and making sure that our licenses are used, very cost effectively. Sometimes we have, for instance, because we have more than 100 different systems. So some systems, we actually have a very limited licenses. So my staff will be taking off from someone, provisioning to another so that we don't buy additional licenses. I hope that answers your question. Maybe it's a little bit too much detail.
Thank you. Mr. Trejo, a second bite of the apple?
No, it's a follow-up question to the last one that was asked regarding...
Another big question?
Yes. Well, my name is Carlos Hidrejo, Precinct 14, town meeting member for Precinct 14. Mr. Callanan responded to the previous question, but I believe there are two items that we would not be in compliance. One of them would be, first of all, the storage of past meetings, since they're all stored on the BIG's YouTube channel. And the second of all would be who would be doing the transmission or the recording or the of both the select board and the school committee meetings, which are required to be transmitted.
Well, I think that would be a topic of conversation if that happened.
Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. Our current Zoom licenses actually store all the meetings that are recorded via Zoom. So the storage issue is being duplicated by BIG. And so those would remain with the town as well.
Okay, no back and forth. We heard the answer. Everyone gets the gist. Town clerk, $1,472,159. Mr. Toffel, and then
Hello, Mike Toffel, Precinct 8. Question for the town clerk. Did you request sufficient budget for your department to respond to public record requests to meet deadlines specified by state law? If not, why not? If so, did your budget request get approved? Thank you.
Ben Kaufman, Town Clerk. Thank you, Mike, for the question. There are a number of requirements in the Town Clerk's office that we struggle to meet because of our staffing levels. And we do make those requests as part of our budget cycle. And one of the responsibilities that the town has is to balance the requests from the town clerk's office with requests from other departments. I say one of the hardest jobs to do in Brookline, it's not running elections, although I do think it's fairly challenging. It's not overseeing town meeting, which I know is quite a challenge as well, but it's a job that's done by Melissa Goff and Charlie Young every budget cycle, which is to meet with departments and tell them no. And that's not saying no because they don't believe in the work or no because they don't believe it's a good idea, but no because they have to look at a holistic view of the town as a whole and balance budget requests from different departments. Do I always agree with it? Probably not, but that's because I have my department, and I obviously think my department's the most important one. But I think it's incredibly important work that they do, and I'm very appreciative of the consideration they give and understand the immense challenge they have of trying to balance a budget as complex as Brookline's.
So I appreciate all that, but the question is whether your requested budget was sufficient for your department to respond to public record requests to meet deadlines specified by state law. And if not, why wasn't your request for that amount? And if so, did your budget request get approved at the amount you requested?
Correct. And as I stated, the request that we submitted was for additional staff to address a number of issues, including compliance with the public records law. We received some additional staff, but not as much as I believe would be necessary to ensure full compliance on the timeliness question of responsive records to the public records law. And our best estimates, I believe, for full compliance with the public records law, it's between 10 and 15 hours a week of work that would need to be done in the town clerk's office. In a good week, I'm able to get up to 10 hours. In a week like this week of town meeting, it's closer to 1 or 2.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mike Harrington, Precinct 16. Taking a look at the budget over the years for town clerk's office, I'm just wondering that it seems to go up and down quite a bit, culminating in a 95% increase this year. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit why it goes up so much, ultimately having us double it this year. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. This is a question that actually comes up quite often with the clerk's office because of that up and down. And the answer is elections. We have different number of elections in each year. This past fiscal year, we've had 1 election, the election that we ran this past May. In the upcoming fiscal year, we will have 3 elections, the September primary on September 1st, the November election on November 3rd, as well as next year's annual town election. So most of the budget increase is driven by the cost of elections, and that's why you'll see that vary dramatically for years that we have a high number of elections, which is also my opportunity to remind you all to make a plan to vote in the fall.
Thank you. Next department is the Planning and Community Development Department, and I'll just comment that a manager in that department, Ewan Lindo Smith, is retiring after 41 years of service. So congratulations. The Police Department, $21,140,000. Wrong column. $22,457,680. Fire Department, $21,063,066. The Building Department, Mr. Ananian.
I'll let you finish reading your column, though. You want to finish reading the number before I
yes,
ask my
Building
question?
Department?
Yes, a building.
Okay, Building Department, and I'm just going to make a comment, then I'll. The number is $13,056,742, and the comment is the commissioner of the Building Department is also retiring after quite a few years. Mr. Ananian.
C. Scott Ananian, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 10. And I have a question for the building department, although it might get redirected, so we'll see. So last week, temperatures were measured at 148 degrees Fahrenheit on the rubberized play surface over at Driscoll School on the playground for 2.5 to 6-year-olds. Concerns about the lack of shade on those playgrounds at the new Driscoll School were raised repeatedly, including here at town meeting, and folks who have been here a while might remember the debate about turf, and temperature of the playing surfaces was one of those things. We have been assured repeatedly that there were shade structures in place. In an email conversation earlier today, the building department said that the responsibility for installing shade structures on those playgrounds belonged to Parks and Rec. But it does seem like all fingers are pointing in a circle here. Parks and Rec is number 18 on our list today. So I'd like to pose the question to the building department, who is responsible for installing shade structures to make sure our playgrounds for 2 to 6-year-olds are safe on sunny days? And if the answer is the Parks Department, you'll see me in 6 line items.
So Mr. Bennett? Another one who's just raring to speak.
Thank you. Dan Bennett, Building Commissioner. My understanding, the question on this is not the turf surface outside of the building. It's the roof playground area. We purchased, or the project purchased, umbrellas to go on that surface to provide the shade that's needed. But the building department completed this project more than 2 years ago, and we financially closed that out a year ago. So I do not think it's the building department's responsibility. And Park and Rec, or somebody that is involved with the playgrounds or parks, should look into that. We could certainly work with them, but there's nothing on our agenda to correct this. The umbrellas are there, they're purchased, they just haven't been installed.
I think we're going to see Mr. Ananian again. We're getting the runaround. I love it. Public Works Department, $21,564,052, and I hope folks took advantage of their opportunity to meet with Public Works staff a couple of weeks ago. The library, $4,808,400. Yes.
Margot Malloy, Precinct 12. This is a question for the town administrator. My understanding is that, one, our libraries are excellent, that we have a great new library director, and additionally that our librarians have been working on a contract for quite a while. So my question is that, given that the library is only about 1% of Brookline's overall budget, how can we get our great librarians and new director the resources they need, particularly to finish out their contract?
Chas Carey, Town Administrator, thank you for that question. As we talked about last night, librarians are under the authority, or they are organizing under the authority of AFSCME, Council 93, our largest, I believe, union by membership, although there are several sub-branches of that union, but they include members of the Public Works Department, members of the Buildings Department, really folks from all across the non-public safety departments. Those negotiations are ongoing. They are a priority for us. I think it's important, because they are ongoing, I don't want to be accused of negotiating in public. I don't want to be accused of putting proposals out there before putting them before the union. So I'm limited in what I can say. What I can say is that it is a priority for us to settle that contract sooner rather than later, and that we are engaging in multiple meetings with AFSCME to do so over the course of the next month. So thank you.
Can you give any sort of timeline?
I think it depends on where we get to. I am happy to, I will continue to provide updates to the select board on this, and hopefully from there we can transmit that out to the public. I realize that this is a priority for the public as well. I'm very grateful that we've been able to settle contracts with the public safety unions. I want to get us there with AFSCME as well, so it is a priority for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the Health Department, $1,581,436, and I'll take this opportunity to welcome our new Health Director, John Klaschinski. Oh yeah, I failed to recommend our welcome our new head librarian, Jill Mercurio. Mr. Lebovitz?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. I had a question regarding the budget for the Department of Public Health, and I was wondering if Director Klaschinski could give this body an update on the implementation of the Renter's Handbook bylaw that this body passed at our previous town meeting. Thank you.
And this is Mr. Klaschinski's maiden voyage at town meeting.
Thank you for recognizing that. Thank you for the question. John Klaschinski, Director of Public Health and Human Services. Yes, so the Human Services Resource Navigator, who started in October, was primarily focused on getting Find Help, which is now CARES Brookline, off the ground. That came out, I think, today in the news that has launched, and so has now pivoted to the Renter's Handbook, understands the timeline, and has drafted. We have a draft, so we are on track at this point, and I expect we will get one published in time to comply with the bylaw.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Veteran Services, 291, 958. Council on Aging, $1,550,917. And I'll welcome once again Emily Williams. I think this is her first full budget cycle. I think she was here last year, but I'll welcome her again. Recreation, $1,258,275, and I'll bet you we know the question, Mr.
Yes.
Ananian.
I will say Marissa Vogt corrected me, and this probably should have been under Parks and Recreation. Sorry, Parks is under Department of Public Works.
But you can ask the question.
Thank you.
Mr. We'll let them duke it out.
Town meeting member Clint Richmond reminded me that 148 degrees was on the main field at Driscoll, the turf field. Town meeting member Kim Lascalzo measured 135 on the playground for the 2 and 5 to 6 year olds. This was raised repeatedly during the design process, these this particular playground for the young kids is not publicly accessible except through the school, but in general our playing fields associated with the schools are a resource for the entire community. So I guess my question is, given that there is still no shade on these playgrounds, could I ask the Parks Department what the plan is to remedy that?
So Parks or Rec can fight over who's going to answer. It's like Parks is winning.
Thank you for your question. Millie Pradhan, Director of Parks and Open Space. So I would say that this playground is on a roof structure, and typically our playgrounds that Parks builds and our Parks and Open Spaces and school grounds, it's on grade, right? So because the fact that this is on a building structure on a school where there is not an external public access, this becomes one of those projects like where we would need collaboration between parks and building and also the school principal. So this is something we're actively looking into. We hear your concern and we're trying to figure out like how to work together, how to collaborate together to get to a solution.
Okay, I think that's a little unsatisfying given that we've been having this conversation for at least 6 years, I think.
Yes. And it's also, again, there's been multiple back and forth conversation also internally. Is it, does building own it? Does park own it? Or who owns that? And I think that's one of the reasons. And the other reasons is that, why it's been a little bit tough to get to a solution is that a roof play area, if you've been there, it's extremely tight, right? Like with extremely limited play zones, safety surface zones where, each play equipment is tied to a safety zone where if a child falls from the play equipment, then there's enough cushion with this resilient surfacing to make sure that they're safe and, they don't hit any intrusive objects. And that's part of the issue for us, or challenge to figure out how to still provide that shade, while respecting that safety surfacing zone. Part of that heat also there that we're experiencing is that because it's on a roof structure, there's all these lights that's kind of bouncing off of the facade, off of the building material, and glass that's like reflecting back onto the play equipment. So, there's, again, multiple challenges there, multiple issues, and I hear your frustration.
My understanding is that the town has already purchased umbrellas that were just not installed. So
We cannot install those umbrellas, unfortunately, because, again, as I mentioned, anything within the place safety surfacing zone, safety zone, we cannot have any object installed there because, again, like imagine that if a child falls down and hits that vertical component of the umbrella, they will be hurt, right? So we do not want that. And based on this, the certified playground safety inspectors reports, like we are not by code allowed to do that. So it's an unfortunate situation.
I certainly hope that I won't be here next year asking the same question.
Right. I think that's as good as we're going to get, and I hope the town and the schools have heard you, because this is going to come up again, and it's kids we're talking about. Mr. Penzel.
Mark Penzel, Precinct 2. I'd like to ask the Recreation Department about the status of the outdoor pool feasibility study and what, if any, next steps will be taken other than reading it once the study is complete.
Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Tim Davis, Recreation Director. Thank you for your question. A few weeks back, the bid opened for the feasibility study for interested parties to submit a bid to conduct the feasibility study. I'm happy to report that we had 4 submittals. Right now, where we are in the process is the review period. So the committee that we've put together to review these submittals are hard at work reading through those. Interviews will be conducted over the next 2 weeks per the schedule, and then negotiations and a hopeful award will take place after that. Schedule beyond that will be negotiated with the individual that we agree to bring on, and the results of that study will guide our next steps or where we think it's appropriate to proceed.
If I could just ask one follow-up, how long do you anticipate the feasibility study taking?
I don't know exactly. It's going to come down to negotiations with the individual, with the company or the firm that brings it on when we talk about scope and their understanding and their process of making sure that they do all the work that's required. So I'm happy to report back throughout the process. You can email and reach out at any time.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Ms. Turner.
Thank you. Ann Turner, Precinct 3. And I would like to take this moment to thank Tim Davis for following up on the feasibility study. Last night, when Dennis talked about actions that community members can make, this is an example of something coming through that's been asked for the community for decades, and of the town meeting appropriated funding for. I want to thank the advisory committee for following up on that and making sure that the feasibility happened. And I want to thank all the members of this body and members of the community for supporting this action, for signing the petition that we have, and for those of you who have donated to the fund at the Community Foundation to support the initiative. So thank you, everyone. I hope that we'll all be swimming before too terribly long.
Thank you. Mr. Lowenstein.
Mark Lowenstein, Precinct 12. This question has to do with tennis facilities in the town of Brookline. So first of all, just wanted to thank Parks and Rec for the recently opened Amory courts, the clay courts, which have been significantly improved. We're already all enjoying them. I did want to ask about the schedule for some of the other court renovations. I believe there was an FY26 appropriation for the courts at Columbia and also Lawrence, but the sort of the 3 facilities that could really use work, and we've had a little bit of an exchange about this, are well, the courts at Lawrence, the courts at in Coolidge Corner at the Ridley School, and then also the courts at Waldstein have also significantly deteriorated. There's a huge sort of fault line running across all 7 courts, almost unplayable at this point, a little bit dangerous. So I'm just wondering if you could just give us a bit of a timeline on some of those other court renovations. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you for the question. I'm going to defer to my partner here, Millie in Parks, so I don't speak out of turn.
Neely Pradhan, Director of Parks and Open Space. Thank you for your question. I can address 3 of the courts that you mentioned. So Wallstein timeline, it is scheduled to be repaired just sometime later this summer. As for Coolidge and Ridley, those we have the CPA grant funding to that project. We secured that as part of FY26, and we are hoping to release an RFP for a consultant to come on board and help us with the design process and also start the public review process. So that we're aiming to send out in this fall. So once the RFP process comes out, it takes us anywhere around 2.5 months to get the designer on board. Then, so you can expect sometime later in the winter this year to start that public review process.
Thank you.
For the other Lawrence Court, again, that will be something we will continue to assess and see when that can fit into the renovation plan.
Thank you. Moving on, the Personal Services Reserve, $832,717. Collective Bargaining Town, $2,039,959. Total town departments, 103, 455, 124. Moving on to the schools budget. One note. Town meeting provides a sum of money to the schools. Town meeting has no authority to dictate how the schools spend that money. That's done by the school committee, so detailed questions should go to the school committee, and you work that process. That said, Mr. Shannon has a question after I announce the amount. $149,801,900.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Maxim Shainin, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. Question for the superintendent. First of all, of course, want to commend the superintendent for all the great work that's been done with the schools in this first year of tenure. So thank you very much. My specific question was on the special education services. So of course, as we know, and was pointed out in the survey, that it's about 1/3 of the total FTEs are special education FTEs. It's translates to about 1 FTE per roughly 3 students, with that receive special education. This is also the number of special education FTEs has been increasing versus the while the student population has been decreasing. So in sum, it's very significant. Sort of, part of FTEs and the budget overall. So my question was, do you have any specific plans for detailed data gathering on how special education is being administered? The granular understanding of settings, what are the outcomes that will perhaps enable the school committee first, of course, but of us as a community to maybe better understand, what are the outcomes and any possibilities for greater efficiencies there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wang?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So one of the major cost drivers for the budget is the cost of special education and other special. Bella Wang, yeah, thank you. Bella Wang, Superintendent of Schools. Thank you. Sorry. Special education and other special services, ELL, there's a mental health, are all major cost drivers of the school budget. Yesterday, I shared a slide of our staffing pre-pandemic and then where we are now. And so proportionately, our numbers actually are about the same for the number of students, for the number of staff. But the proportionality of the staff delivering special services has increased, and then general education staff has decreased. So that is very true. This is not unlike any other district in the state, nor unlike any other district in the country. So this is, as we are more limited by fiscal constraints, that is what is happening, that our general ed staffing is going down. So you see that difference in proportionality That being said, I want to take special care that almost 40% of our students are receiving special services, and it's a highly regulated area by the state with various regulations. So only students that are eligible for services receive them. So it's not discretionary, it's mandated. I also want to take special care that for our families with students that are receiving services, that we are committed to deliver those services, and those are services that they need. That being said, I think you're asking, are we making sure that we are staffing as efficiently as possible? And as I said yesterday, we reviewed all our caseloads in preparation for the budget for next year, and also as we project long term. And so we adjusted for enrollment as careful as possible. One thing that I can see that the public schools of Brookline have done is made a significant commitment to in-district programming. But for that in-district programming, more students would be going out of district. Sometimes we can't meet the needs of a student in district and they must go out of district. Understand that out-of-district tuitions are not controlled by us. They're controlled by the state. They've been increasing anywhere from 4% to 14% to 7% on a given year. So we do our best to keep students in district. The other expense that comes with placing students out of district is transportation. So it hits us in two parts of the budget. So again, we do our best to keep students in. Now, when you keep students in district, in particular programs, sometimes you have a caseload of 6 students in a class, up to 16 students in a class. So it can vary depending on the intensity of the profile of the student and the services that they're receiving. There are 2 charts I shared last night. One is a comparison of all our special ed costs as we compare to our other districts, and we are below the average. I think that speaks to the commitment that Brookline Public Schools has taken toward building those in-district programs. When I also showed a chart of our out-of-district placements, and we were the lowest, tied with Newton in against our comparable districts. So yes, this is something per student is more expensive, and we try to manage that, and we are monitoring as well as we can, and the numbers actually indicate that it didn't just start with me, but it's been part of the prior administration to date.
Thank you.
But I also want to say again that students are getting the service they need, and so we are doing our best to be as efficient as possible in providing that service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Vocational educational assessments, $15,000. And we've now gone through all of the departmental expenditures, $253,272,025. Moving on to non-departmental expenditures, employee benefits of $99,123,428. The reserve fund, $3,601,679. The stabilization fund, $3.5 million. The affordable housing trust fund, $1,070,667. The liability catastrophe fund, $2.182,237 million. Mr. Ananian?
I'll defer to
Mr. Hebert?
Yeah, John Hebert, Precinct 7. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have a question about the employee benefits section.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I have regards group health and the fact that group health was one of the budget busters from this year, growing 11.4%. And the question is if...
Microphone.
Sorry. The question is if we are, well, there are a couple of questions. Are we paying for GLP-1 drugs are we covering that in our healthcare costs? And secondly, I'm curious to know if the town is doing anything about Brookline paying 83% of employee healthcare costs when most other towns pay 75 to 80% of those costs.
Who wants to take on those?
Chaz Carey, Town Administrator. Thank you for those questions. We are a member of the GIC. The GIC no longer covers GLP-1s for weight loss. They dropped that coverage and as of July 1. So beginning in this fiscal year, we will no longer have coverage for GLP-1 drugs. And that did result in some savings. So that number would have been even higher but for that change. What are we doing? So we have to negotiate with all bargaining units, including retirees, in order to change that 83% number. A weighted percentage of those groups need to say yes, and as you can imagine, that's a tall order. With that said, we are working on it. Again, similar to the AFSCME question, I can't bargain in public, but I can say that this too, I mean, the expenditures and revenues made very clear that this is a priority in the next 3 years, and we are working to get that done.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anania?
Yeah, the item that you just read, the contingency fund, the past years I read like $8,000, $7,000, $8,000. Oh, sorry, Scott Nanian, town meeting member, precinct 10. $8,000, $7,000, $8,000, $980,000, and then back down to $10,000. And I was wondering if I could get someone asked me about that earlier today, and I could not give an explanation for why that was.
Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. Last year, when we were finalizing the fiscal 26 budget, there was a question of whether or not the school department would need those funds in order to balance their overall fiscal 26 ask. We had reduced a CIP item for the New Lincoln School grounds and put that money in the contingency fund in anticipation of maybe needing to adjust it in November. We did not do that. We did not need to do that because they used the circuit breaker account in order to come into balance. And so under Article 5 earlier yesterday evening, we appropriated those funds to both snow and ice removal and the fire department overtime budget.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I call on Ms. Thal, I'll just, for those who are remote and wish to speak, please enter your request in the chat. Raising your hand doesn't do it. So, Ms. Thal.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is this one on? Carolyn Thal, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 16. And I hope I'm following on the right page here. Can somebody please refresh our memory what the liability catastrophe fund is? And I notice that is percent change from FY26, 262.4% change. I'd love to know more.
Melissa, you want to take that one? I'm sure there's a good reason.
So the town is self-insured, except we do have some policies for vehicles and some property insurance as well. So these are, the liability insurance fund basically allows us to settle claims that are made outside of the policies that we currently have. The reason why there's such an increase is that the policy requirement for funding of the liability fund is 1% of prior year net revenue. We've had some pretty substantial claims over the past couple of years, and so what is required to meet the policy target is the reason why it's going up so much in fiscal 27.
Sorry, can you just say the last part again? The requirement is?
1% of prior year net revenue is the target.
Okay, you mean of prior year?
That's the target for funding of the liability fund. And so what we are appropriating will bring us to the policy target.
And why have we not been at the policy target before?
When we settle claims, the balance in the fund depletes, and then we need to replenish it with free cash.
Oh, I see. I understand.
There was some claims.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, general insurance, $1,519,824. Audit and professional services, $127,000. Contingency fund, $10,000. MMA, that's Mass Municipal Association dues, $50,000. And the override stabilization fund, $16,000. No, that's, nope. The MMA, okay, I missed. The printing of warrants and reports is $50,000. The MMA dues is $16,110. The override stabilization fund is $3,568,303. And then we will be borrowing a total of Borrowing expenses, debt and interest is $49,425,313 for total non-departmental expenditures of $164,194,561, which brings us to a total general appropriations of $417,466,585. I'm getting a little worn down, so my reading the numbers is getting a little frayed here. So those are the general appropriation numbers. We've gone through the special appropriations, which brings us to the total appropriated expenditures, and this is our vote, $439,876,474. And that's what we're going to be authorizing the town to spend. So that is the motion, and I think we're ready for a vote on the town budget. A yes means you approve it. No means you don't approve it. That was yesterday. That advisory committee, that's Dennis, seconded by select board. How soon do we forget this? The motion passes 231-1-3. Okay, so we've now completed the most consequential vote of the town meeting, and we're ready to move on to maybe a little less consequential, but just as important, the CPA, which is Article 9. Just let me get. So the motion is moved by Ms. Heller on behalf of the CPA committee, and is seconded by Mr. Lescoyer. And there's going to be a motion to divide the question. So the CPA committee's motion is one omnibus motion, and then there'll be a motion to divide the question moved by Mr. Berger and seconded by Mr. Buono. And you're going to be hearing about that. And you'll decide whether or not the motion's going to be divided after you hear all the presentations and questions about the various projects. So I turn the microphone over to Ms. Heller.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nancy Heller, Town Meeting Member Precinct 8 and Chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee. Do we have our slides?
But it's not on the screen.
There we go. Okay. Community Preservation Act appropriations for fiscal year 27 are the main motions we're going to have, and then we're going to have project votes on the 8 projects that the committee is recommending. I want to go to the next slide, please. I'm assuming you all know what the Community Preservation Act is. It's adopted by the legislature in 2000. We unfortunately didn't get onto it until 2021. The voters voted for a 1% surcharge on their property tax. And now, then for the first 2 years, the committee was getting organized and planning, and then we began to make some grants. You'll see that the committee is 9 members, 3 at large, and 6 are from other boards and commissions as directed by the statute. Next slide, please. You have 3 options. One is you can approve the recommended projects that we present, or you can deny them, or you can approve them at a reduced amount, but you cannot increase them or add any new projects. Next slide, please. There are many eligibility requirements for CPA projects. Land restrictions, property deeds need deed restrictions. Studies should lead to eligible funded projects. CPA funds cannot replace existing operating budgets or staff costs, or used for routine maintenance, except in housing in very limited circumstances. And each funding category has additional restrictions. Grant funds are released, unlike many other grants. We don't just hand over the money to the grantee. They're dispersed, the grant funds are dispersed after the invoice and documentation has been submitted. And our staff, Laura Smead, examines those, makes sure that they are compliant with the application and that they're eligible. Any unspent funds remain with CPA. We don't have this free cash problem where there's no free and no cash. We keep the money in our accounts, which is a good thing. The next slide, please. Yeah. This is a slide which shows you the project eligibility. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I do plan to send you all tomorrow morning these slides so that you can study them if you so wish, or you can do whatever you like with them. Overall policies, one of the most important ones, and I think that the community is interested in, is that we want our projects to advance climate resilience and sustainability, and to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also look at projects that can cover more than one category and leverage additional funding. CPA delivers, next slide please. CPA, this is a slide of the CPA plan. I have a URL link on there and also a QR code, so when you get this tomorrow in your email, you can go and look at it. But this is our Bible and what we go by. We developed the plan over more than a year with lots of community engagement. Next slide, please. Okay, I think I covered that already in the overall policies. Would you go to the next one, please? Yeah, this slide is kind of neat. It's a map of where our projects are, and it's an interactive map, which again, you'll be able to have a link and a QR code. The important thing is that we're going to have 37 projects if you approve the ones tonight, for a total of $16.5 million in CPA funds, and also leveraged almost $16 million in funds from the community or grants or the state, et cetera. So for a total of $32.5 million, that's what CPA's brought to the table in the past 3 years if tonight's projects go through. The next slide, this is the first set of things you'll be voting on. We may vote it as omnibus or it may be divided, but these list the amounts in the different buckets for CPA. We have unallocated budget reserve, open space, historic preservation, and community housing, and then we have administration. That's the only bucket that we will actually spend next year. All of this money, what we're doing is we're authorizing the treasurer to take the money from as it comes into the general fund and put it into these CPA buckets. Now, we're going to go to the next slide, please, and I'm going to ask Sue Cohen from the Housing Authority, and she's a commissioner, to come up and talk to you about the housing.
Hi, I'm Sue Cohen. I'm the chair of the Brookline Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. The housing goals that we've accomplished with the support of town meeting and all of you have been really phenomenal in the area of housing. In the past, we've covered many of the objectives of the CPA plan, and we've created new housing for low-income individuals. We preserved existing low-income housing, particularly the Brookline Housing Authority is very grateful for your support. And we've also supported low-income tenants facing eviction. Next slide. So here's really just the 3 different buckets that we're looking for you to authorize this time. First of all is the Trustman Apartments roof preservation. Trustman Apartments is a Brookline Housing Authority project. I'll go into detail in the next slide. The High Street Veterans is also a Brookline Housing Authority project, and we're proposing $398,317 for that project. And our third project this year is CPA funding for the Brookline Affordable Housing Trust, which is the Housing Advisory Board. Next slide. The Trustman Apartments is in 86 affordable units, very aging, state-assisted public housing development. One of the great things about the town of Brookline supporting the Housing Authority is that it makes us eligible for matching funds from the state. And in the past, we've sometimes gotten up to 2.5 times a match from the HILAP program, which stands for High Leverage Asset Preservation Program, which comes from the Executive Office of Housing and Community Developments. We're looking here for $1,178,630 from the CPA, which we anticipate will leverage at least 1.5 times that amount from the state. And this would be a critical repairs to the roofs and the development to make sure that we don't have damages from leaks into the units, which would deteriorate at an even faster rate than they do ordinarily. Next slide, please. The High Street Veterans Project, we reduced from the initial ask, which was for $1.56 million, which is what it would take to preserve all the windows at the development. But the CPA just didn't have enough funds overall to fund this in one round. So this will cover about half of the project. We'll have to have a phase 2, very likely come back to you next year. And again, these preservation projects are just critical to the quality of life for our residents. And finally, the third request, next slide, is for CPA funding for the Brookline Affordable Housing Board, $400,000. The original request was for $1 million, but again, that was reduced to $400,000. And this is a non-specific allocation. It's very common among communities that participate in the Community Preservation Act program to allocate funds from the CPA to the HAB, which is particularly qualified to be overseeing particularly large housing projects because their board consists of experts in a wide range of professional areas, as well as low-income residents representing the community that we're serving. In this instance, the money going to the HAB is not specific, but they will have to follow CPA requirements. The money will be segregated, and it'll definitely be allocated. We have a wonderful example this year of the way in which the CPAC coordinated with the HAB to address an emergency that came in from the Brookline Community Development Corporation, where they needed some emergency funds because of unanticipated conditions that were discovered during construction. And the request came in January. And we meaning CPAC, we can't respond to that because, as you see, we have a funding round that requires your approval. But the HAB was able to respond to that, and consequently, they were able to fulfill that need, and we support them in that. I ask you for your support for these projects. You've been amazingly supportive in the past, and I ask that you continue to do that.
Next, Brooke Richard from the Historic Preservation Commission is going to give you the Historic Preservation Project.
Hi, Brooke Richard with CPAC.
Speak into the mic, please.
Sorry, Brooke Richard with CPAC, representing the Preservation Commission. After thorough review, these are the projects that we After thorough review, these are the projects that we recommend for the 2027 funding cycle. The first project is the old burying ground restoration. This is it's Brookline's first cemetery. It's near Chestnut Street, close to Lincoln School, and it's an important part of the fabric of our community. It sits like right in the middle of the town. Beautiful park, beautiful steep hills and tall trees, and under those trees are a lot of crumbling tombstones that are at risk of crumbling away. They are in desperate need of restoration, as well as the deteriorating wall surrounding the graveyard. And it's also a park that people enjoy walking through, so we want to maintain it. It's a special place. There are plots there that include enslaved people that are an important part of our history, and veterans, and America's first female hit songwriter. Her tombstone is there as well, but it has fallen apart. So these funds will help preserve all of these important things. I don't know her name. She was a poet, but there's an article.
No,
there's
let's
an article.
not have a back and forth. And the group is running long, and they're going to run out of time. So.
The second one is the restoration of the steeple tower of the United Parish Church. And actually, I don't know if I mentioned, the last project is asking for $865,398, and we are recommending that we meet that budget. The second project, the restoration of the steeple tower of the United Parish, they have requested $800,000 in CPA funds, and which is 2.5 times. They're matching that 2.5 times with other grants that they have found along the way. The CPA recommends that we provide that much. They are looking to restore the steeple tower, which is part of this large church. The church was built in 1873. Most of it succumbed to a fire in the 1920s. Most of it was destroyed except for this steeple, which remained, so it's a really important part of history. It is now under a different threat of its own deterioration. The stone, the beautiful stone on the exterior is starting to crumble. It's creating safety hazards for everyone visiting the church. And the church serves multiple community organizations. The grant is secular. There's no funding for religious symbols. That part of the church is just for the exterior materials for the historic building. And I think that is it. These are projects. Thank you.
Clara Batchelor from Parks and Rec and Sam Burrington from the Conservation Commission will present the open space and rec projects.
I'm going to take the mic out. Hi, I'm Clara Batchelor. I'm chair of the Park and Recreation Commission.
I'm Sam Burrington, and I'm on the Conservation Commission and the CPA.
So can we have the slide? Next slide. Thanks. The open space and recreation goals that were accomplished by FY25 and 26 awards were as follows. They create a new recreational assets, including pocket parks, community gardens, and trails. They funded plans to rehabilitate or restore existing recreational facilities, such as the ice rink, tennis courts, and boardwalks. They preserved open space through invasive species management, tree inventory, tree plantings, and landscape reports.
Next slide. So for fiscal year 2027, we have 3 recommended projects. The recommended grant funding amounts are as follows. Firstly, $35,000 for a tree inventory. Secondly, $20,000 for invasive species management at D. Blakely Horse Sanctuary, and lastly, $375,000 for a green infrastructure study at Lars Anderson Park. Next slide, please. So the tree inventory, the amount being $35,000, is the 3rd consecutive year of an ongoing effort to support and further the goals of the Urban Forest and Climate Resiliency Master Plan by first inventorying the health of trees in our parks and their canopies, and secondly, conducting structural pruning the year after an inventory has been conducted. And I will not list all of the parks in this round. Next, please. So secondly, we have $20,000 for D. Blakely Horse invasive species management. This is the 2nd consecutive year of this effort against pesky invasives at that sanctuary. The effort will involve a very labor-intensive clip and drip method where herbicides will be applied to the stalks of individual plants, and this effort will be concentrated around the boardwalk area, and in future years possibly expand beyond that.
Okay. And the 3rd project is the Lars Anderson Green Infrastructure Study proposed by the Parks and Open Space Division. And this is really important for advancing climate resiliency. There are 4 components of this study. One is to preserve and expand the wet meadows through restoration and new plantings. The second is to enhance passive recreation with integrated boardwalks and paths. The third is to deliver full construction documents for bidding, permitting, and cost estimating so that we can advance all these projects. And just so you know, the area, since Lars Anderson is our largest park, the focus of this study is the hillside from the Auto Museum to the lagoon and Avon Street and Goddard Avenue area. Thank you.
Thank you. And to conclude, please.
Thank you. I'm here to close. I just want you to see the available funding was $4,072,345 in the 3 categories, and we ask you to vote favorable action on all the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Berger? Hope you'll be shorter than that one.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Berger, Precinct 15, member of the Advisory Committee, and speaking for the Advisory Committee. The advisory committee had but few concerns about the specifics of the current year's appropriations, and the set-by policy has been described. For the first time, the FY 2027 appropriation includes a $400,000 grant to the town's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as been described. There was a discussion about whether the CPA could become a larger, more stable source of funds for the Housing Trust Fund, potentially eliminating the need for the town's contribution from free cash. The CPA committee is in discussions with the Housing Advisory Board regarding the execution of a memorandum of understanding. So, do we do it by piecemeal, or do we do it together? A significant portion of the discussion at the advisory committee centered on whether town meeting and the advisory committee should vote on the CPA projects as a single omnibus package or as separate projects. Several committee members argued that splitting the question into separate votes helps transparency and helps town meeting members better understand the support for the individual projects. They emphasized that separate votes would provide feedback on public priorities and ensure accountability for individual grants. Opponents of dividing the question argue that the CPA was intentionally designed to center on collaboration and compromise. They wanted the separate votes, they warned that separate votes could undermine the CPA system of cooperative spirit. Some members also noted that town meeting had previously rejected a similar attempt to divide the CPA vote. As seen in our recommendations, the committee voted to divide the question and to take separate votes. The advisory committee also discussed considering whether participation in the town's pilot program should be a future requirement for nonprofit CPA grantees. And we also discussed commissioning an assessment of the CPA program as the town approaches the 5-year anniversary. So additionally, if town meeting chooses not to divide the question, the advisory committee also made a conditional recommendation of favorable action on the omnibus motion under warrant Article 9 by a vote of 20 to nothing with no abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buono.
I will try to be shorter than Michael. Anthony Buono, member of the Select Board, speaking on behalf of the Select Board. Warrant Article 9 authorizes the Community Preservation Act Committee, CPA Committee, to disperse just over $4 million in funds for affordable housing, historic preservation, open space, and recreational projects. Since Brookline adopted the Community Preservation Act in 2021, the CPA Committee has established a deliberate and transparent process for reviewing and recommending projects. These allocations are the results of months of review and public engagement. The CPA Committee does its best to spend in each of its relevant categories: community housing, open spaces, and recreation, historic preservation, with equal weight. They try to do so not at the same level every year, but in the totality of their work. So what are we funding this year? For housing, it is $2 million, historic preservation, $1.6 million, and for open space and recreation, it's $430,000. This includes a significant investment into our housing authority and housing advisory board, investments in preserving United Parish Church steeple tower, and preservation of the old burial grounds, and finally, for study to preserve and create wetlands invasive species removal in Lars Anderson Park. The Select Board supports separating the motion and voting on each project at a time, so town meeting members can express their opinions on a single project without having to vote down the entire appropriation. Thank you to the CPA Committee for all their hard work, and the Select Board recommends favorable action on dividing the question and on all of the projects unanimously, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lynn Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Sean Lynn Jones, town meeting member from Precinct 1 and president of the Brookline Green Space Alliance. I'm speaking for the Green Space Alliance, which recommends favorable action on the CPA appropriations for the old burying ground, the D. Blakely Horse Sanctuary, the tree inventory, and the Lars Anderson Park Green Infrastructure Study. Please vote yes on these items, whether there is a separate or a combined vote. The Green Space Alliance has not taken a position on whether there should be a separate or combined vote, nor have we taken a position on any of the other CPA grant recommendations, which really aren't directly relevant to green space. I want to thank Chair Nancy Heller, the CPA committee, and its staff. They've vetted all the applications carefully during many meetings of the full committee and its subgroups, and I know that because I attended many of those meetings and also went on one site visit with members of the committee. They take their work very seriously. And several of these recommendations for open space and recreation and the green space are supported by the relevant Friends groups, including the Friends of the Old Burying Ground, which has taken a deep interest in that parcel. And I'll point out that that's classified under historic preservation, but it's green space. It's, as actually was noted in the previous presentation, it's a park with beautiful trees, an elegant historic landscape, and it should be maintained for safety, to discourage vandalism, and to respect the history. Multiple enslaved persons are buried there, and at least one indigenous person, as well as many other famous people and early settlers of Brookline. Finally, I want to mention Betsy Shore-Gross. Some of you may recall that last night she was listed among the other former town meeting members who are no longer with us. Many of you probably did not know Betsy or serve in town meeting with her. I know some of you did. She was a prime mover behind the Community Preservation Act. In fact, it's probably fair to say that the CPA was Betsy's brainchild. And as Nancy Heller mentioned, it took a few years for Brookline to actually accept the CPA and begin receiving funds and raising funds from Brookline residents. That delay was an endless source of irritation to Betsy. But she was very glad to see us finally accept the CPA and to begin using it for the purposes of historic preservation, community housing, and open space and recreation. We're still figuring out that process, as evidenced by the comments of Mr. Berger and the more general question of whether to divide the question or not. But we're using that money for community projects going beyond what we have in our regular budget. So please vote yes on the Green Space Alliance's recommended CPA projects, whether you vote together or separately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hefter has a question. He's remote.
Good evening. Jesse Hefter, Precinct 14. My question has to do, let me see if I can mute myself here.
Please tell us your question.
The $375,000 fee for consulting for a portion of Lars Anderson Park. My question has to do with where that fits in with the reasonable cost for consulting for just a portion of the park.
I didn't really get the question. Is the question, how does the $375,000 fit into the total project cost? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Someone want to take this on? Oh, we have a volunteer.
Mili Pradhan, Director of Parks and Open Space. So the budget allocated for Lars Anderson Park for CPA, its focus is going to be focused on the design for the green infrastructure and invasive removals and adding new public elements, the boardwalks. So essentially it's the design fee and also from concept design to construction documents and also for public review process.
Thank you. Mr. Penzel?
Mark Penzel, Precinct 2. I just want to clarify something, if I may, because it wasn't clear from the advisory committee's presentation that it appears, tell me if I'm incorrect, that the advisory committee and the select board wants us to take 10 separate votes on matters in which individually there were not a single dissenting no vote on any of these projects. Is
That
the
seems
case?
to be
Thank you.
correct. Ms. Thal?
Carolyn Thal, Precinct 16. Sorry, just going back to the Lars question. Did you say boardwalks at Lars? And can you say where there would be boardwalks at Lars?
Yes, so our thought is that once we have the, essentially through green infrastructure, we're going to be expanding the existing wet meadows. And, we are, conceptually thinking, integrating some boardwalks within those wet meadows and green infrastructure elements to add more of a public education component to the importance of green infrastructure and these wet meadows, and how can we add that experience and create that more public enjoyment experience in Lars Anderson Park.
What does green infrastructure mean exactly?
So green infrastructure is essentially similar to, rain gardens, like where we have runoff, like there's runoff that happens within the parks, within the, from after a rainfall, right? There's a runoff, and then these green infrastructure, think of a sponge. When you put water in sponge, it soaks up the water and it slows down that runoff process. And in the process of that, if it's a dirty water, the different holes in the sponge catches that dirt, right? So that's essentially a very simplified answer of what a green infrastructure is. We want to think about, we did this wonderful project last year, completed the roadway and drainage project within the park. So to complement that, we're thinking about, okay, how can we take that runoff from these roadways and larger park and direct to these wet meadows and, create that cleaning component and also slowing down water, right? And that way that helps slow down the runoff that goes into our storm drains and helps reduce the flooding risks. And that's, again, whole larger conversations that we are currently having with climate resiliency, and how do we adopt that into our park projects and open spaces.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Arissa Boyd, who's remote, and then I'm going to call Mr. Vitolo.
Hi, my name is Teresa Boyd, Precinct 15. I hope you're able to hear me. I muted myself, so you're not getting the feedback that I had before. My question is about these walkways that you're talking about, because I haven't heard of any design review and to be funding something that the community has not been able to have an input on is concerning to me. So can you please let me know what that process is going to look like if this gets funded?
Millie Pradhan, Director of Parks and Open Space. Yes, certainly, Arisa, that will be part of the design review process. And it's, again, really initial idea. And, the thought is that once we have the green infrastructure, we want to make sure that the community understands what that is. And, there's a public education component of that. And one way of doing that is, yes, signage is going to be there, right? But also being able to interact with that. But given that this is a historic park, we want to do it in a way so that it's respectful of the park history and, all the other amazing historic components that's going on around Lars Anderson Park. So absolutely, this conversation will be part of the public design review process. And, we would not put a boardwalk there or any walkway without community input.
Mr. Vitolo.
I am State Representative Tommy Vitolo, Town Meeting Member at Large. I want to thank the CPA Committee, chaired by Nancy Heller. Its work is substantial, and I am grateful for the committee's suggestions. And I want to emphasize that they are suggestions. The law is clear that it is our job as town meeting members to decide whether or not to allocate property tax dollars with a state match kicker to any or all of these suggestions. I'd also like to extend a re-welcome to town meeting member again, Carol Caro of Precinct 11. Her husband chaired the Recorded Vote Coalition, wherein he and I and the gentle lady now from Precinct 11 and maybe 24 other folks who are still in town meeting forced recorded votes beginning in May 2008, despite the required additional time, because we felt that the public deserved that transparency. And many folks in this room are big fans of transparency. Both Progressive Brookline and Brookline PACs are in favor of town meeting members Toffel and Leibovitz's warrant Article 12 to add transparency to public record requests. Transparency also comes up in the combined reports write-ups for Articles 8, 10, 11, 22, 24, and 25. Voting to divide the CPA question is a clear vote in favor of transparency, and of course, your vote on the motion to divide will be transparent to voters as well. I spent time at every single polling location on Tuesday, May 5th. I listened to town meeting candidates north and south, liberal and conservative, incumbent and challenger, make promise after promise to the voters. Many candidates supported the yes override position, and all candidates made it clear that we as a town have got to both seek non-residential property tax revenue and be careful to spend our money wisely, to scrutinize our processes, our procedures, and our expenditures. I hope those candidates will make good on their promises by voting yes to consider each CPA suggestion separately. Of course, I hope those who weren't on the ballot this year will do the same. I believe that voting each CPA suggestion separately allows town meeting to communicate its preferences to the CPA committee, both as a town meeting and as individual members, to communicate its preferences to potential CPA applicants, and to communicate its transparent recorded votes to Brookline residents. I ask that you join a unanimous advisory committee, a unanimous select board, and me in voting favorable action on the motion to divide the question.
I have a point of order question, if that's okay.
Yes, Ms. Couture-Stone.
Elise Couture, Precinct 2. So in the mindset of transparency, how long will it take us to vote through these separate votes?
Yeah, the question is how long will it take? I estimate it'll take 25 to 30 minutes. I have to explain each vote?
I rise for a point of privilege, Mr.
Yes.
Moderator. Representative Vitolo in his remarks stated that the advisory committee had voted unanimously to divide the question. As one of the members of the advisory committee who voted not to divide the question, I just wanted to be clear that a unanimous vote of the committee was to support the main motion and each motion separately, not to divide the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the first vote is whether or not to divide the question. Are we ready for a vote? The motion fails 93 to 139 to 5. The motion we're voting is on page 214, And it's really three motions. The first motion is to, and we're going to be voting them in omnibus fashion. The first motion allocates incoming revenue. The second motion allocates admin expenses. And then the third motion allocates all of the projects that we've spent the last 45 minutes talking about. So with that said, a yes vote approves all these CPA expenditures, and a no vote does not. And that's all town meeting can vote, up or down. So we're ready for a vote? Here we go. Motion carries 229 to 9 to 5. Next up is Article 23, stipends for select board and town and school committee members, and John Karen is going to be moderating that.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Karen, Assistant Town Moderator. If there was any justice at this point, we would cut to our musical guest, either Lady Gaga or Paul McCartney. Then we'd have a commercial and we'd come back and it'd be time for Weekend Update. Unfortunately, we can't do that, but we do have warrant Article 23, which is sort of an interesting warrant article. It's a resolution concerning the question of stipends for select board and school committee members. Let me give you a little bit of a roadmap to what we'll be doing. The main motion is found on the yellow supplement, Supplement 1, on pages 1 to 3. And that's moved by Ms. Vogt. It's going to be seconded by Mr. Golden. And there's going to be 2 votes on that. One would be on the question of supporting stipends for select board members. And then the second vote would be on the question of supporting stipends for school committee members. Now, there's an advisory committee motion, which is found on page 23-2 of the combined reports, to refer the whole darn thing to a moderator's committee. And that's going to be moved by Mr. Leibovitz and seconded by Mr. Dowdy. All of these are going to require our majority votes. The sequence of what we'll be doing, and we're going to have one debate on the whole shebang, the sequence on what we're going to be doing is first we'll have a vote on the advisory committee's motion to refer the whole subject matter to a moderator's committee. If that passes, the debate is done. If that fails, then we'll have a vote on the select board portion of the resolution on Article 23. And regardless of what happens with that, we'll have another vote on the school committee portion of Article 23. And again, we're going to have one debate on the whole shebang, and it's going to start with the petitioner, Ms. Vogt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Vogt. I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 6.
I want to start by thanking my co-petitioner, Jonathan Golden, as well as many others who have helped us out along the way. And most importantly, I want to acknowledge the folks who led similar stipend efforts in 2019 and 2020 who inspired the article that we are discussing tonight. Next slide, please. Warrant Article 23 is a resolution to increase select board stipends from the levels that were last set in 2011 and to create school committee stipends for the first time. The guiding principle behind this resolution is that serving our town government as elected school board, select board or school committee members should be accessible to everyone. Our goal is to remove a major barrier to participation, which is that service in these roles require hundreds of hours each year of unpaid or effectively unpaid volunteer effort. Currently, select board members receive a stipend of just $3,500, and school committee members receive no stipend at all. No compensation for their time, not even reimbursement for caregiving, transportation, or any other costs that they may incur. While on the one hand, we can be proud that the spirit of volunteerism is strong in our community, we must also recognize that volunteering is in itself a privilege that remains financially out of reach for many members of our community. I want to be clear that this resolution is not about the folks who are currently serving on those boards. It's about the people who can't get a seat at the table. It's about the people who are not in the room with us right now. It's about how we can make it more economically feasible for single parents to run for and serve on the school committee. It's about how we can make select board service accessible to residents who need their full-time salary in order to pay the rent each month. Many of our peer municipalities address this by offering substantial stipends to their elected officials. Our resolution is a first step toward removing these financial barriers to participation. Next slide, please. I won't have time to get into the details, but I want to remind everybody that these tables, which show municipal executive and school committee stipends from 2020 in neighboring communities, are part of our article explanation. And the explanation also includes a table that calculates stipend amounts based on ranges of hourly pay rates and work hours per week, to which I would just remind you that the Norfolk County livable wage is around $40 an hour. Next slide, please. So the final version of our resolution that we're voting on tonight asks town meeting to support raising select board stipends to $4,999 per year and to create school committee stipends of $4,999 per year by fiscal year 2030. This future date was chosen to give the town time to identify revenue sources or expenditure offsets. Why $4,999? We had initially proposed stipends ranging from $20,000 to $40,000 per year, but during the article review process, we learned that stipends above $5,000 could potentially incur pension contribution costs that were difficult to quantify in the time that remained before town meeting. So our resolution, therefore, now asks town meeting to affirmatively support increasing stipends beyond the $4,999 level once the total cost of the town, including pension liabilities, can be reasonably estimated, and calls for the creation of a moderators committee to conduct that estimate, to make recommendations for how to pay for the increased stipends, and to make recommendations for the structure and amount of stipends beyond $4,999 per year. Next slide, please. I urge you to vote no action on the advisory committee motion to refer, and instead to vote yes on the petitioner's motions, which will be voted on individually for select board and school committee, because only the petitioner's motion affirmatively states support for increased stipends. The AC motion would refer the general subject matter, but it does not actually charge the committee with increasing stipends or covering costs for childcare or meals. The AC motion doesn't even affirmatively support any inflation-related adjustments to select board stipends, which were last set in 2011. This is frustrating given that the $3,500 member stipend that was set in 2011 would have the same buying power as a $5,100 stipend in March 2026. So I'm asking you to please help us make service in our town government accessible to everyone by removing a financial barrier to participation. Please vote no on referral and then yes on both of the petitioner's motions. Thank you.
Thank you. I may have misspoken when I was directing folks to where to find the AC's referral motion. I think I may have said it was on page 23, 2 of the combined reports. It's actually on page 2312. It's tiring for everyone. That having been said, we'll next hear from Mr. Lebovitz.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Moderator. Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8, and member of the Advisory Committee, speaking tonight on behalf of the Advisory Committee. As originally introduced, Article 23 called for introducing stipends for school committee members of $20,000 and $25,000 for the chair, and to increase the stipends received by select board members to $35,000 and $40,000 for the chair. The petitioners argued that the enhanced stipends created by this version of Article 23 would make serving in town government more accessible, particularly for individuals who cannot afford to volunteer their time without compensation. They highlighted that the current lack of adequate compensation for townwide officials disproportionately reduces the opportunities for individuals from lower income backgrounds or those with young children or caregiving responsibilities. Concerns were raised about the potential impact on the town's budget, particularly in light of the structural deficit and the need for budget flexibility given limited revenue growth and rapidly increasing fixed costs, such as the town's contribution to employee health care costs. The Advisory Committee discussed the need to ensure that compensation does not inadvertently favor one demographic over another, potentially leading to a homogeneous group of elected officials. Committee members also expressed the desire to explore ways to attract individuals who might not traditionally consider running for office due to financial barriers. The petitioners presented a comparative analysis of compensation levels in neighboring communities for executive officers and argued that Article 23's proposed stipends would better align the town with regional compensation standards. Some members of the Advisory Committee argued that differences in governmental structure and the inherently different role of a mayor or city council may explain or justify differing compensation levels in different municipalities. The Advisory Committee also inquired as to whether increasing compensation for members of the Select Board and School Committee would also require the funding of additional employment or retirement benefits. HR Director Braga confirmed that any town employees receiving annual compensation of over $5,000 would also be eligible for vestment in the town's pension system after 10 years of service. Because the stipends paid to members of the Select Board are currently below this $5,000 threshold, none of the town's elected executive officials are currently eligible for pension vestment. The petitioners then introduced a revised motion which amended the article to call for the increase of Select Board stipends to $4,999 and the implementation of $4,999 stipends for members of the school committee effective July 1st, 2029. The petitioners explained that this was done in response to the concerns raised during the Advisory Committee's review around the potential triggering of new pension obligations by the enhanced stipends called for by the original version of Warrant Article 23. In reviewing the revised motion, some members questioned whether enhanced stipends would indeed attract a more diverse set of candidates, and concerns were similarly raised that increasing the compensation for currently volunteer positions could inadvertently lead to more entrenchment among incumbents or change the incentives that currently lead dedicated volunteers to choose to run for office in the first place. Several members also expressed dismay that enhanced stipends were being proposed during a year where voters were already being asked to approve an operating override and difficult cuts had already been made to the budget, including the reduction in force of 22 teaching staff from the public schools of Brookline. By a vote of 15-9 with one abstention, the Advisory Committee recommends referral of the subject matter of Warrant Article 23 to a Moderator's Committee to report back to town meeting with recommendations during calendar year 2028 to allow for potential implementation of said recommendations by July 1st, 2029. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zimmerman.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Zimmerman, speaking on behalf of the Select Board. The revised Warrant Article 23 is a non-binding resolution seeking to modestly increase the Select Board stipend and to introduce a small school committee stipend starting in fiscal year 2029. Select Board members initially questioned whether we could vote on compensation that could eventually benefit ourselves. Town Council clarified that because, one, Warrant Article 23 is a resolution, And two, even if it was a bylaw change, the small increase in the select board stipend would take effect after the next election for the entire select board. Select board members may feel free to vote on the article without conflict. The changes to the select board stipends are particularly modest, almost keeping up with inflation since they were last updated in 2011, with the moderators committee tasked with evaluating any further increase and reporting back the full cost to the town. Petitioners indicated that their goal is to modernize compensation so that civic service is more accessible to more residents, especially residents who cannot afford uncompensated or low compensated public service roles. The current stipend structure, especially the complete absence of school committee stipends, creates barriers to entry for people with caregiving duties, lower incomes, or limited work flexibility. Due to the complexity around payments exceeding $5,000, triggering potential pension liabilities, the petitioners revised their article to introduce a more modest stipend increase now and to direct a proposed moderators committee to study larger changes and report back within a defined time frame. The select board generally agreed with the desire to make the select board and school committee positions accessible to a wider range of residents, consistent with our 2030 roadmap goal 4B, to diversify the residents engaged in town processes, but thought it prudent to get the full picture of cost to the town before any potential larger increases. Just to give a personal anecdote, in the last campaign season, the #1 question I got at almost every forum and event leading up to it was not, why are you running, or what's your platform, but rather, how are you going to manage it all, work, kids, and select board? My answer then, as it is now, is that I'm lucky enough to have flexibility with work hours, a willingness and ability to make a financial sacrifice with my time, and an incredible support structure from family and friends. But one should not need the convergence of all three of these factors to throw their hat into the ring to serve our town and run for our highest municipal office or a school committee. While both the AC motion and the petitioner's revised motion would lead to moderators committee, the petitioner's version would encourage modest stipend increases in 2029, in addition to studying further potential increases. Even with the modest stipends proposed for the school committee, this might allow school committee members to attend events, hire childcare coverage during meetings, or otherwise support the functions of the school committee. Thus, the select board encourages support for the petitioner's version of warrant article 23, rather than the more ambiguous AC referral motion. The select board voted 3-0 with 2 abstentions in favor of the petitioner's revised warrant article 23. Thank you.
Okay, we have some speakers. We have some additional speakers signed up, but before we do that, we have some people who are in line to ask questions. Unfortunately, Ms. Scotto, Ms. Frowley signed up in advance of the meeting, so I have to let her not be jumped in the line. I hope you'll understand, and you will be next. Ms. Frowley, I know you had a question. And tell us, of course, who you are and what you want to know.
First of all, Barbara can stand better than me. Good for you. Regina Frawley, South Brookline, Precinct 16. Yes, and I think I've been validated. You're kidding, wow. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I had a discussion earlier today with the moderator in which I said that select people can be vested, and I've been validated, they can be. It was based on even the low stipend at the time, and it wasn't for 10 years, which is normal for an employee. It was longer because it's part-time. So it still is something that can be vested no matter what the stipend is. So my questions are, can Ann Braga, our head of HR, or anyone else, be able to answer all the benefits that they currently do have in both the select board and the school committee? Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Goff, who's the right person? I didn't bring my phone with me, so I couldn't check my email after a certain period of time.
Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. We did get advance notice of this question, so we did try to assemble the list of what we think are the current benefits for select board members. I didn't understand that the question also applied to school committee, so maybe Ian, if I miss anything on that. For the select board member, we feed them before their meetings so that they are able to, not always, but usually when we have executive session. There are dedicated parking spots in the garage at Town Hall. We provide them with .gov email addresses. If they need a device to help them attend the meetings and manage the Zooms, they are able to access that. If they attend a Mass Municipal Association conference, we reimburse them for their conference fees and related expenses. And they also do get Medicare because they are paying into the, they have a payroll deduction for Medicare. So, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone who can shed some light with respect to the school committee members? Okay. The moderator is stage whispering that it's about the same thing, so. Oh,
We don't get dinner.
okay. Thank you. Moving along, Ms. Scotto, tell everybody else who you are and what you want to know.
Barbara Scotto, Precinct 2. Barbara Scotto, Precinct 2. I have been... If I step any closer, it's going to... Oh, thank you. All right. I think this is an interesting idea to make more people want to run and able to run for town meeting, for select board or school committee. However, I have taught for many years in the Brookline schools as well as a couple of other places, and I've been on the school committee, or I was. I'm not any longer for either of these things. But I was also on the school committee for several years. And I look at that and I think, what do you need on the school committee? You always need more money because there are so many things going on in school that you have to take care of. I don't mean you, the teacher, I mean the schools and the students in the schools. And particularly what I heard recently was that the class sizes were going to be getting much bigger, and that's one of the reasons is that there's not enough money to pay the teachers. Although I would like to have received some money when I was on the school committee, I would much rather have had the money, if I were to receive it, to go to the schools as opposed to the other thing.
So, just to be clear, at this stage, I'd like to limit it to questions because we have folks who have signed up, and if people want to speak from the floor, of course, you'll get your opportunity, assuming that folks don't call the question. But right now, I wanted to focus on folks who had questions. With all respect to Ms. Scotto, because your remarks were perfectly appropriate and on point, but I think we're going to try to do questions at this point. And you are next. No, excuse me, you are not next because town meeting member Arissa Boyd, who is remotely, was waiting in the queue ahead of you. Sorry to you, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you so much. Again, Arissa Boyd, town meeting member, Precinct 15. My question is why we are looking at including the school committee if we're, and not all of the other committees. I'm a preservation commissioner, recreation commissioners. There's so many people, so many different committees where we do give our time and our energy, and many of us do have small children. And I'm wondering if there has been any looking into what kind of opening of the floodgates that would be to across the board needing to compensate everybody who sits on every committee, every commissioner. I mean, demolition is one of the biggest tasks. As one of my colleagues was there tonight speaking, she has small children. I had children in school when I started on that committee. So what investigation has been done about what the domino effect would be? Thank you.
Rather than call on the petitioner to answer that, what I'm going to indicate is that both versions of what's in front of town meeting tonight would refer at least some of the subject matter to a moderator's committee, which one would assume would probably be able to take that into account. So I hope I'm not shortchanging the petitioner, but I think that's probably the answer that would be to your question. Now, tell us who you are and what you'd like to know.
Mark Penzel, Precinct 2. This concerns the school, proposed school stipends. And it's a two-parter, which is first, would these stipends be paid out of the school budget? And two, if so, isn't there a problem with town meeting telling the school district and the schools precisely how to spend their money?
Well, an interesting question. The first part, I think, is what's the intent of the resolution in terms of where the funds come from? That, I think, would be appropriate to have the petitioner answer. The second part has to do with the legalities, and that might be more appropriate for town council. But let's ask the petitioners what the intent is of their...
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Moderator, and thank you for the question. Jonathan Golden, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. As I've researched this issue in other communities, I know it's handled one of two ways. Sometimes it is part of the administration budget of the school's budget, and sometimes it's handled more centrally, similar to how the stipends are handled for the select board. I think this would be, since the implementation will not happen till fiscal year 30, I think, again, this would be a perfect question for whichever form of the Moderators Committee is formed to decide what would be best in terms of handling it for Brookline.
Mr. Callahan, do you want to add anything on the fly as to the potential legalities of the of telling the school committee to of telling the schools to pay school committee members?
Joe Callahan, Town Council, and I thought that was an excellent answer from the petitioners. It could be done either way. It would be up to how it would be implemented. So you could put it outside the school budget and require it, or you could put it inside the school budget and leave it up to the schools to decide.
Okay. Mr. Warren, I think you were next at the microphone.
Thank you, Assistant Moderator. Recovering Select
tell
Board
everybody
Member
who you
Paul
are, you know.
Warren, Precinct 1. My question is regarding messaging out to the voters. We just had a major operating override, and my question is perhaps for administration or town council, was included in the message to the voters about how the funding for the schools in the town was being used. Was there any mention of a potential increase in compensation for volunteers?
Mr. Terry.
Chaz Carey, Town Administrator. No.
Thank you.
If only all of our answers were that quick and to the point. But of course, some questions can't be answered that simply. Mr. Margolis.
Mr. Moderator, I think I was ahead of Mr. Warren, but Ms. Thal was ahead of me.
Entirely possible. That's okay. He's yielding to you for a moment. I don't think we'll mind.
Thank you, Jonathan. Carolyn Thal, Precinct 16, but I'm not sure I have a question at this point, so do you want me to not make a comment?
I would prefer it only
Fine.
because I'm letting the questions jump some speakers who've signed up. So.
Then Mr. Margolis it is.
Thank you.
The gentle lady yields back to the gentleman from that side of the room.
John Margolis, Precinct 6. A question for the proponents. Have they considered a stipend for the long-suffering and chronically underappreciated members of the advisory committee?
I'm going to take that as a rhetorical question simply because it's not really within the subject matter. Not that it's a bad rhetorical question. Yes, tell us who you are and what you want to know.
Hi, I'm Patty Correa, Precinct 6. My question is about the motion to refer. We've heard discussion at this town meeting about the town's plans to address the pension obligations of the town through 2030 and then take on OPEB obligations, outstanding OPEB obligations. And so my question is about the motion to refer. In reading the combined reports, the language, the text of the motion to refer contemplated a committee that would look just at the cost of pension obligations But I'm wondering, I'm just looking for confirmation, I guess, that the motion to refer also contemplates review of OPEB costs, because it seems to me that group health insurance through GIC, that would be automatic with 10 years of service if a stipend level were to reach at least $5,000 a year under current law. Could be a not trivial obligation. It would also be an enormous draw, I would think, potentially, to candidates to run for town meeting, because there is the potential to have group health for life after 10 years of service, also for a spouse. Thank you very much.
Well, if the question is that something that the Moderators Committee could consider, I can answer that one. And if Mr. Wyszynski comes up and tells me I'm wrong, you should listen to him. However, the motion that's being made by the Advisory Committee is to refer the subject matter of Warrant Article 23 to a Moderators Committee, which would be broad enough that anything that's within that subject matter that was brought up by the petitioners could be considered, including, I would think, the issues you've just raised. Now, whether they deem them worthy of consideration, that's up to them, but they certainly would have the authority to consider any of the issues that were raised by any of the subject matter in the petitioner's motion, if that helps.
Thank you.
Oh, who's next? We'll go to this side of the room. Tell everybody who you are and what you want to know.
Hi there, Petra Binyami, Precinct 12. A sort of logistical question. My understanding is that school committee can meet in a hybrid setting, and that if school committee members can't attend in person, their votes are fully counted in meetings and on items. Is that true for select board as well?
Chaz Carey, Town Administrator. Yes.
We're on a roll here. Thank you, Mr. Carey. Tell us who you are and what you want to know.
Hi there, Susie Roberts, Precinct 17. I don't think that we should be making light of why advisory or any other volunteers who aren't part of this warrant article, even though it's a resolution, I understand that, aren't also considered. And I was curious about the petitioner's decision to limit it to school committee and to the select board, because it seems to me that there are a lot of deserving people who spend a lot and maybe more time than these others. And I was curious about how we would deal with that as a town if it were opened up, and why are we here with these two committees only?
So
that's for the petitioners.
Technically, that's sort of beyond what we're discussing. However, being the second person to raise that question, I'll let the petitioners briefly respond, since people do seem to be curious about that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Jonathan Golden, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. We have received this question many times, and understandably, there are many hardworking people in town. The decision that we made for this particular warrant article was as follows: to focus on those who are elected town-wide and have executive oversight, and where there are comparable communities that compensate these positions. That doesn't preclude, if people in future times would like to expand the circle, they are welcome to do so. But we felt, and I would argue in particular for the school committee, we felt, when looking at comparable communities, that was important to focus there. And really, as you can see in the current resolution, we're largely increasing for the cost of inflation on the select board side, to limit it to that at this time. That's not to preclude, again, others who wanted to take it further in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. I know, but tell everybody else who you are and what you'd like to know.
Thank you, Clint Richmond, Town Meeting Meter Precinct 6, and my wife serves on the school committee. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have cut the benefits for at least the select board, because they formerly got health insurance. Am I remembering that correctly? I'm looking at some of the old timers over here. Yes, Bernard is nodding yes. So that I just want this body to understand that we have actually been cutting it over. It's been cut over time.
Is there anybody who'd like to confirm that for Mr. Richmond and maybe give town meeting an idea of how much, if that's correct, that's been cut?
Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. I think Clint is recalling that there was a warrant article, I don't recall what year, it was over 10 years ago, where the select board stipends were reclassified as reimbursement of expenses instead of compensation, as a way to reduce the level of benefits that the board was eligible for.
Who are you and what do you want to know?
Thanks. Wendy Friedman, Precinct 5. I was just curious, since there are all these questions about other committees, and in here, just in terms of the workload in the description of this resolution, it says 5 to 25 hours a week in addition to time spent on all of these other things. Is it possible to get a clearer sense of how much time a select board member and school committee member spends?
Well, let's start with I think we could start with the select board. Is there
Per week.
anybody, perhaps one of the veterans, although Ms. Zimmerman, you did speak on behalf of the select board if you've polled your colleagues, but if there's anybody who, looks like Mr. Green.
Bernard Green, Select Board. We spend a lot of time doing a lot of things. Committee assignments, answering questions from the community, preparing for Select Board meetings. Every week we have to prepare for a Select Board meeting. Actually now, except for some weeks when we don't meet, prepare for select board meeting by reading or becoming sufficiently knowledgeable about a thick packet between 200 and 1,000 pages sometimes. We don't necessarily read the entire packet. We have to understand what's in it so that we can intelligently discuss it at the select board. Constant questions from the community to deal with specific issues. From roads to rats, of course, and other things. We do a lot of work, way more than, 5 to 20 hours a week. Now that's when I was chair, and David, you should know this, the work that we did was just incredibly extensive. Now that I'm not chair, it's a little less. I can now pay my bills and clean my house and read books. But still, we're really responsible for responding to all of the questions that we get from town meeting members and from residents, whether on the phone, by email, or, I live in the Brook House, just walking around the Brook House, people constantly ask me about, for example, the pilot road project on Washington Street, for example. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to sort of say specifically how many hours we spend, but it's a lot.
So the answer is a lot. Now this is a little trickier because I think there was also a component that said, do we have a sense of what the folks on the school committee do? And I don't know if we have anybody who's actually on the school committee that feels comfortable. Carol, yes, you can if you want, if you'd like to share.
Carolyn Thal, School Committee. I can only speak for myself. I think it's probably pretty different. So we meet once every other week. Our meetings are usually 6 to 9. Sometimes there's executive session. Everybody is on a subcommittee. The subcommittees meet once a month, typically. I think if you're chair of a subcommittee, that requires a bit more preparation. If you're on policy or finance, I think that requires a little bit more preparation. But again, the subcommittee meetings meet once a month. Most of us are on 1 or 2. They are 90 minutes to 2 hours. If you're chair or it's meaty, there might be a couple of hours of prep, an hour, couple hours. We also respond to emails, but on a rotation, so once every 9 weeks. We're responsible for responding to emails. And actually, the school committee has a lot less authority than a lot of people think. So usually our responses to emails are sort of polite and kind of cursory and don't tend to be able to be really substantive or problem solving. So all that said, I think this was prefaced by someone saying, was it 5 to 10, 5 to 20? I would say 5, maybe 5, 10 might be a lot. It's running is more work than serving. That's what I always say.
Well, I'm going to see if there are a couple more questions. And do all the people at the microphones have questions? Real questions, not like rhetorical questions. I'm going to take 1 or 2 more questions, and then I probably will entertain a motion to call the question. Tell us who you are.
Sure. Scott Englander, Precinct 6. My understanding is that there would be a moderators committee constituted whether the article is referred or not. My question is, would there be any difference in the nature of the charge of that committee under either circumstance?
Well, to paraphrase Mr. Carey, yes, but I suspect your question is actually what's the difference? I think probably Ms. Vogt or Mr. Golden can answer what the difference is if they're between referral to the moderators committee envisioned by the AC and referral portion of their resolution that would refer to a moderators committee.
Thank you for the question. Jonathan Golden, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 17. You will see in the write-up of ours, there are some more specifics. We would like some consideration of the research that's been done thus far. Of course, it can be questioned and added to. I think the timeline is to return to town meeting a little bit quicker in our case is what we're asking for. And we would hope that the charge, which would be 1 year from now as opposed to about 2 years from now. And so those are the main areas, I would say. So that some of the questions and area suggestions that we've added about looking at comparative communities, thinking about the pension issue, I think would be looked at in both, but the timeline will be a little bit faster. And I think that is important to consider that this is something that has been on the agenda. This is the 3rd time coming before town meeting, and I think it's important at this point to really research and understand how we would like to go forward and what recommendations the committee would have for us.
With the utmost respect to Mr. Golden, it turns out we have an even more authoritative source on the difference in the moderators committee, the town moderator who would be appointing the committees.
The way I see it is the petitioner's motion has some specific amounts that should be implemented immediately, and then suggestions on some specific amounts, whereas the AC motion is more general and less prescriptive.
Tell us who you are and what you want to know.
Thank you. Maxim Shainin, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. My question is for the petitioners. The petitioners assert that the increased stipends will increase the diversity of people serving on the select board and the school committee. Looking at the data presented by the petitioners, if we look back 40 or 50 years ago, the stipend that the select board members were receiving at that time in current would have been equivalent to current dollars to about 35, I think 40,000. So that's consistent with what the increased petitions are proposing. My question is, do we have any data saying that at that time there was greater diversity on the select board of Brookline than there is today?
So the question is, do we have any data as to whether or not there was more diversity back when the stipends were comparatively higher?
To the proposed in current dollars.
That would be something that the moderators committees would be looking into, I assume, to get answers to. And I have it on good authority from the moderator that that would be part of their charge. So I think that's the answer.
Thanks.
Okay, we have had multiple motions to call the question, and I will entertain that motion. Let me tell you who's both signed up to speak, and you can see who's at the microphone. We have Ms. Khan, Mr. Ananian, I don't see anybody else at the microphone. Signed up to speak, however, we have Mr. Golden and Mr. Ananian, who will both be speaking in favor of the main motion, and then Ms. Thal, who has signed up to speak against the main motion. Don't have any other speakers signed up, but that's who would be talking if we continued, plus questions. It's been moved to call the question. I'm pretty sure I heard a second. Fair enough. Okay, so we'll have a motion to call the question. Requires a 2/3 vote. And are we ready to do this thing? Let's do this thing. Okay, 191 in favor of cutting off debate, 39 opposed, 7 abstentions. The motion carries, and we will move on to now vote. Our first vote is on the advisory committee's motion, found on page 2312 of the combined reports, to refer the entire subject matter of Article 23 to a moderator's committee. And a yes vote would do that, and a no vote wouldn't. Requires a majority vote, and let's do it. Well, the motion to refer to a moderator's committee fails. 118 in favor, 120 opposed, and 6 abstentions. Oh, okay, I was looking at percentages. Okay, so anyway, that fails. So now we will have 2 more votes. And let me just explain, and also we have to correct a little language for the record. The first thing we'll be voting is the issue of stipends for the select board. And that resolution appears on page 1 and carries over to page 2. And on the supplement, on the yellow supplement, thank you, gentlemen. We also need to just add some language to make it all legal. So where it says motion offered by the petitioners, and then it says voted, after that, the language needs to be inserted that the town adopts the following resolution. I am told this makes a difference. So this will be the first vote, and it will be whether to adopt that portion of the resolution that starts there and ends basically, yeah, okay, you got it. Select board, let's drop the vote. Pay no attention to the babbling assistant town moderator. Okay, 137 in favor, 85 against, and 15 abstentions. The motion with respect to the Select Board is approved. It passes. The next vote is for the portion of the article pertaining to the school committee, and that begins on supplement number 1. It's the yellow sheet for those of you who got them in the mail, but it's supplement 1 for everybody, mail or online. And it starts on page 2 of supplement 1 and runs through the end on page 3. Just as we did with the select board portion, we have to add the language at the beginning, voted that the town adopts the following resolution to make it all street legal. So those words will be inserted into the resolution. Again, requires a majority vote. Yes vote would adopt the resolution with respect to the school committee, and a no vote wouldn't. So let's do the vote. Okay, 120 in favor, 111 opposed, 13 abstentions. The portion of the resolution pertaining to the school committee also passed. I'll turn over the con. Thank you for your attention and engagement during this one.
It's funny, I said to the petitioners, anyone who proposes a moderator's committee needs to be prepared to serve on it. And anybody who wishes to serve, please email me. Okay, we're ready for Article 10. This hopefully will not be controversial, and we can move through it quickly. The motion is made by Mr. Boers, seconded by Mr. Perlman, and the motion is on page 10-6. And Mr. Rothman for CTONS will be presenting.
I'm Ian Rothman, speaking for the Committee on Town Organization and Structure, or CTONS, the petitioner on our warrant Article 10. CTONS is a 7-member committee appointed by the moderator that reviews and makes recommendations on any warrant article that would alter the organization or structure of town government. Article 10 amends Section 2.2.1 of the general bylaws, which sets the qualifications for appointment to the advisory committee. The article would replace an existing restriction that advisory committee members may not also be members of, quote, any standing board or committee having charge of the expenditure of money, close quote. It replaces that restriction with a more limited one, that advisory committee members may not also hold elective office of town government other than as town meeting member or constable. Article 10 results from town meeting's vote last November to refer the subject matter of then Articles 11 and 12 to CTONS for study and report. Those articles were prompted by town council's interpretation of the existing bylaw language that a, quote, standing board or committee is any committee that is expected to exist for longer than 1 year, and the phrase, quote, having charge of the expenditure of money means any voting responsibility for the allocation of town funds even if not the final say. That interpretation would have disqualified at least 2 sitting advisory committee members from continuing to serve solely because they also held appointments to other town boards or committees. After referral, CTO&S held several public meetings and 1 public hearing about the subject matter. We were guided in our deliberation by 3 core governance principles. First, preserving a separation of the town's legislative and executive branches of town government. Second, maintaining a separation of financial functions. And third, eliminating ambiguity to the extent possible. The first principle is the separation of the town's legislative and executive functions. The advisory committee is part of the town's legislative branch. Authorized by state law, it reviews appropriation requests, submits a budget to annual town meeting, and has authority to examine the town's books and records, all in service of informing town meetings' legislative decisions. The select board and the boards and committees it appoints are responsible for administering and implementing those appropriations, and they constitute the town's executive branch. Permitting an elected executive branch official to simultaneously serve on the advisory committee risks placing that individual in an incompatible position, at once advancing executive branch priorities in their elected role, while also purporting to review those same priorities objectively for the legislature. The restriction on elected officials preserves a clear and meaningful institutional boundary between these functions. The second principle is the separation of financial oversight from financial administration. The advisory committee's function includes reviewing and making recommendations on the allocation of town funds. The principle that those who oversee financial decisions should be distinct from those who administer them is well established in both public and private finance. That said, while appointed boards and committees may play a role in recommending or advising on expenditures within their respective subject areas, few, if any, exercise unilateral authority over ultimate expenditure of funds. CTO&S concluded that separation of financial functions remains vital for elected executive branch officials, but for appointed boards and committees, financial hygiene can be addressed through existing conflict of interest laws, mandatory disclosure requirements, recusal obligations, and the norms of transparent deliberation in open public meetings. Mechanisms that operate on a fact-specific basis and would not require categorical disqualification from appointed board and committee members. We're also mindful that we're talking about volunteers here who are generously donating their time and energy to the service of the town. The third principle is the elimination of ambiguity. In the existing language, neither standing committee nor having charge of the expenditure of money is defined in either the bylaws or in state law, and both phrases are susceptible to a range of reasonable interpretations. The proposed revision replaces this ambiguous standard with language that is clear, objective, and easy to apply consistently. CTO&S voted unanimously to recommend adoption of Warrant Article 10. It promotes clarity, preserves essential institutional safeguards, and supports broad civic participation in a manner appropriate to the town's governance structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perlman.
David Perlman, Select Board Chair. That was a very thorough explanation, so not a lot to add. The one point that I will make is just to emphasize that by continuing to prohibit town employees and holders of elective town office other than town meeting members or constables from serving on the advisory committee, the separation of legislative and executive functions is maintained. The Select Board supports favorable action on this warrant article by a vote of 4-0 to 1.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 Town Meeting member of the Advisory Committee.
speaking for a unanimous advisory committee. I'm also a Brookline constable and a member of the Taxation Aid Committee. For 79 years, Chapter 2.2.1 of the General Bylaw has prohibited members of the advisory committee from also serving as a member of any standing board or committee having charge of the expenditure of money. Notwithstanding the chapter's longevity and apparent lack of controversy, at least in the modern era, last year, Town Council expressed an interpretation of Chapter 2.2.1 that, if applied, would prevent those serving on the advisory committee from serving on certain other town bodies, and vice versa. 2 warrant articles were presented to the November 2025 town meeting in an attempt to alleviate and or better define the restriction on dual service. Following discussion, town meeting voted to refer the subject matter of both articles to CTO&S, and so here we are. Historical records indicate that concerns existed for several years leading up to 1947, when the original restriction was adopted, about the propriety of select board members also serving on the advisory committee, a particularly bad idea. Town government has evolved significantly since 1947, and today few, if any, boards, committees, or commissions exercise significant unilateral authority over the expenditure of town funds. Accordingly, the current bylaw, as now interpreted by Town Council, may unnecessarily limit the pool of candidates willing and eligible to serve on the advisory committee or on other bodies. In a community that applauds volunteer service, Town Council's interpretation may frustrate those most willing to participate without commensurate benefit to the town. CTO&S proposes that Section 2.2.1 be revised to simply prohibit town employees and holders of elected office, other than town meeting members and constables, from serving on the advisory committee. CTO&S believes, and the advisory committee concurs, that the proposed approach strikes a proper balance between the sound principles of separation of legislative and executive functions and a segregation of financial duties, while not overly restricting advisory committee and board, committee, and commission membership. The proposed amendment reflects a lack of demonstrated conflicts of interest, as the bylaw was, apparently from inception to most recently, previously interpreted. A unanimous advisory committee, by a vote of 22-0 with 1 abstention, recommends favorable action. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speakers, and I think we're ready for a motion. So the motion is on page 10.6, and it will, a yes vote is to approve it, as you heard. No vote is to not approve it. Drop the vote. Motion passes 220-510. So now it's 10:20. We have Article 12, where everyone has come to agreement, and I'm wondering if we can squeeze that one in and be done with it. Okay, I'm hearing a yes. So next article is Article 12. The motion is on Supplement 1, page 1. Mr. Lebovitz.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8, member of the Advisory Committee, speaking tonight on behalf of the petitioners of Warrant Article 12. Warrant Article 12 calls for the regular public reporting by the town clerk of, pardon me, technical difficulties, regular reporting by the town clerk of public records requests received by the town, as well as a brief summary of the response provided to each request. This article represents a critical step forward to improving both transparency and accountability in the town's public records process to ensure that all Brookline residents can have confidence that their legal right to access public records is protected and respected in our town. This article seeks to respond to both state and local issues surrounding the public records request process. On the state level, it's important to underscore that 3 years ago, all proactive state enforcement of the public records law ceased. As codified in state law, a person whose public records request is ignored or not responded to in a timely manner may appeal their request to an administrative review within the Office of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. This review can determine whether the public records law has been violated. However, the public records administrator has no direct ability to enforce this law. Instead, historically, cases with a favorable finding for the requester would be referred to the Attorney General's office. All such referrals ceased 3 years ago, due, according to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, to chronic inaction from the AG's office to take any proactive enforcement measures. As a result, the only recourse a resident has, should their request be ignored or unduly delayed, is to bring a personal lawsuit against the town at great personal expense. Locally, timeliness of responses to public records has at times been inconsistent. Additionally, several town meeting members spoke with the petitioners in preparing this article and reported receiving either no or extremely limited responses to duly submitted public records requests. While Brookline is by no means the worst offender, we are a community that values transparency, the rule of law, and good government improvements. It is in this spirit that we offer Article 12. This article would also align Brookline with similar actions taken in other municipalities, such as Framingham, Newton, and Cambridge, all of which have made public records requests and their responses both public and searchable. The petitioners have endeavored through collaborative work with both the advisory committee, the select board, the town clerk, and other town staff to refine our final motion, which is before you this evening, to make every effort possible to minimize the potential associated costs of implementation. For example, we removed the initial requirement that public documents provided in response to a request be posted to avoid running afoul of the costly federal accessibility mandate that was referenced earlier this evening. I will note that mandate has been delayed by 1 year, but we want this article to remain durable going forward, so we made that change. Instead, any interested member of the public under our new motion could request, quite simply, any documents of interest provided to a previous requester based on the public posting from the clerk, who could then provide the already prepared documents, as they'd been prepared for the previous request, at virtually no additional charge. The town would have multiple potential ways to comply with this bylaw, including by making requests publicly visible through our existing FOIA Direct software, as other communities have done, or by exporting the request and response data from the FOIA Direct system and posting that spreadsheet and data on the website separately. I will also note we did partially base our motion upon a records request that was fulfilled in calendar year 2025, where Brookline News actually requested an index of every public records request received that year, as well as a summary of the response, which the clerk did produce. I'd ask that you please join us in supporting Warrant Article 12 and show our constituents that Brookline takes our moral and legal obligations to promote transparency and open government seriously, and that we will take proactive measures to do so, even in the face of state inaction. I urge you to join the advisory committee, the select board, and the CDICR in voting favorable action on Warrant Article 12. Thank you very much.
Ms. Robotham?
Margaret Robotham, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3, member of the Advisory Committee. Warrant Article 12 proposes a new town bylaw requiring Brookline to publicly post on its website, 1, all public records requests received, and 2, a summary of the response. The warrant article is motivated, as Mr. Leibovitz mentioned, by the elimination of state-level enforcement of public records law with the goal of creating a public accountability mechanism in Brookline. This bylaw would require Brookline to proactively publish records that are already subject to Massachusetts public record law timely response requirement. It's a transparency measure. And in addition, as we've already mentioned, Brookline was recently included in a Boston Globe op-ed last fall, wherein residents indicated that public records requests went unanswered. A yes vote would create a legal obligation the town would be held to in order to create a publicly accessible online log of all records requests and summaries, allowing residents to see what information the town is being asked for and if it responds. This would position Brookline along other communities such as Newton and Framingham that already publish these data and create a local accountability mechanism in the absence of state-level enforcement. Estimated financial impact is minimal. There is existing functionality in FOIA Direct, which is the town's public records request database, that would automate this bylaw at no additional cost. Should the town elect a more manual process, FOIA Direct has easy download, upload functionality that should take about 10 minutes of time per month, about $200 a year. The advisory committee is satisfied that this warrant article is a good measure of public record request compliance and believe it's a solid first step to ensure a local mechanism that mirrors the state's timely response requirement. By a vote of 18-0 with 1 abstention by the petitioner, the advisory committee recommends favorable action.
Thank you. Mr. Rubenstein?
Michael Rubenstein, Select Board member, speaking on behalf of the Select Board. Previously, the Select Board made a recommendation of no action on warrant Article 12 on the basis that the juice was not worth the squeeze. The value of providing the log of public record requests sought by the petitioners did not justify the cost of producing it, as explained by the town clerk and others on town staff. Last week, the Select Board passed its 2030 roadmap. This roadmap includes the Select Board's values for the town and town government, 7 goals that advance those values, as well as strategies and actions by the Select Board and town staff to reach these goals. Roadmap goal number 1 is to deliver core services to residents reliably and efficiently within the limits of available resources. The first strategy defined to reach this goal is to document and communicate to residents the strength of town services and improve transparency on service performance. To achieve goal number 1, warrant Article 12 aligns neatly with the strategy of improving transparency on service performance. I want to recognize the concerns expressed by the town clerk that efforts to provide transparency may come at the expense of service delivery. This balance is a common challenge of large organizations responsible to broad constituencies. Nonetheless, we hope the transparency created by warrant Article 12 will lead to a better understanding of the town clerk's challenges in responding to public records requests. We also hope it will lead to better alignment of resources with the services expected of that office. Therefore, on reconsideration of warrant Article 12, by a vote today of 5-0, the Select Board recommends favorable action on the amended version of the main motion for warrant Article 12.
I have one more signed up speaker. Ms. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, Jocelyn Murphy, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 16, member of the Advisory Committee as well, speaking for myself this evening. I'm speaking in support of Article 12 based on my own recent experience with public records requests that I made to the town. You've heard about the investigation that was launched against my colleagues and me last summer, and I won't repeat while I believe that that investigation was misguided. I will share with you, Mr. Carey, however, that I too hold myself to the highest ethical standards. The original complaint against me alleged that I improperly contacted DPW union representatives in a matter that benefited a family member. Because I don't have a family member in Brookline, I pointed this out to the town administrator and the complaint was withdrawn the next day, only to be replaced with a new complaint alleging that I had inappropriately used a photograph of town employees standing on town property to lobby town meeting. At the same time, I discovered that the investigator hired to conduct the investigation could be considered conflicted. So in mid-June, after my request that the matter be referred to the State Ethics Commission was denied, I submitted a public records request seeking answers to questions I raised regarding the investigation. I requested copies of records memorializing the alleged oral complaints made to the town administrator, written appearance of conflict disclosures, and a copy of the investigator's engagement letter. First, I received a response from the former assistant town administrator stating that the records would be produced. Then I received a response from a member of town council's office stating that I would receive records after paying the town $1,500. In response, I substantially narrowed my request to avoid having to pay such a large fee. In response to that, I received an email from Mr. Callanan on August 1st, reinstating the earlier complaint rate related to my non-family member and stating, quote, "We do not intend to produce any responsive documents, nor do we need any additional time, nor do we propose a modified fee estimate." Thus, nearly 2 months after making my request for public records pertaining to the investigation, no records were produced and my request was flatly denied. You might imagine why we did not trust this process. I appealed Mr. Callanan's denial to the State Supervisor of Public Records, who ordered the town to provide me with a response that complied with the public records law. Despite this order and repeated prompts from the supervisor, no compliant response was ever provided. When I renewed my request for these and other records earlier this month, I received the same non-compliant response that I had received last August, along with a referral to the 300-page appendix that is attached to the investigator's report. Article 12 will not solve the failure of the town to comply with the public records law in this case. However, it is a step in the right direction. Please vote in favor of the motion under Article 12. Thank you.
Mr. Buono, you're what's keeping us from voting. So, yeah.
Sorry, just one quick question. Anthony Buono, member of the Select Board. I joined the Select Board in voting recommending favorable action on this one, but I just have a question about a specific edge case that I think is important to set the expectation for everyone here in town meeting. If someone were to make a request for a public record that contained information in the request itself that was statutorily obligated to be excluded from the public record request, say the name of someone who is a subject of a sexual harassment claim, that can be excluded from the record of the request, correct? That can be censored?
Yeah, whoever wants to take that on.
Chaz Carey, Town Administrator, thank you for the question. Yes, we would. That's how we would interpret that law. As if there was an exempt matter in a request, we would still obviously make clear to the community that a request was made. But we would not produce material in the text of that request that was subject to an exemption.
That makes perfect sense to me. Okay, but I'm not a lawyer. Okay, so I think we're ready for a vote. The motion is on supplement 1, page 1. It's labeled motion offered by the petitioner, but it's been also adopted by the advisory committee and the select board. A yes approves it, a no does not. This is Article 12, main motion. Motion passes 229-05. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay, drop the vote. And we will see you all tomorrow at 7 for the Chestnut Hill West debate.
When I came in, open arms. Open arms. I felt the love. I felt the communication. I just felt the passion. And I love it here. They welcome me.
This is a heartbeat, you know? You got real people here. They're empowered. People take agency. They do something creative and it gets rewarded. And it just grows and it's infectious. So I love that part about here. Like I come in here and I get energized, you know.
I feel comfortable when I'm here. I feel like, I don't want to say like a second home situation, but like I feel like I can do everything that I want to do here.